Alrighty.
How about now? Can you hear?
I just heard you.
Can you hear the room?
I can see it.
Jerry? Jerry? Yeah, the room's talking. Can you hear? Yeah, it's okay. We just gotta figure out our audio though.
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of figured since I.
Is that me?
The power button there. Double check.
Get that.
Okay, we'll ask and try to figure it out.
So this is gonna be tricky.
You're not there. Leadership opportunity.
Yep, I think you're right. All right, well, thank you. You got it recorded, so that's good. Okay. No, I don't think so. It's the recording right after.
If they were there sitting.
Okay, all right, thank you. Bye-bye. Laura, are you starting the meeting now?
I am.
When you do, will you see if they can hear us? Okay, we're trying to make sure our owl's picking up the audio.
Yep, sure.
Okay.
Is the.
Yeah, we've, I hear an echo. I think it is.
You made the.
I tell you, we get one thing done, it's like a leak in a pipe. We plug the hole here and then we shoot out somewhere. Right.
Physical button.
I was gonna say, Jim just messed with it, so I think that's the best we can do.
Not to touch it.
Yeah. We did everything obvious about the idea. We tried that. Right, yeah.
I don't know.
I won't do anything, that's good advice. Trust. Yeah.
Andy, the only other thing I'm thinking is going to get another projector, and, cause it's one cord, well, two, a power cord, and then, so I'm gonna go run and do that, okay?
I can do that too.
All right,
Yeah.
maybe the little gizmos, the little new ones,
Okay.
if one's there.
All right.
Those are handy little guys.
Little projector.
Yeah,
Yes, I'll do that.
thank you.
You gotta keep the.
Yeah, okay.
Just to be careful, just in case. Yes.
How are you doing? It's all good. Well, it's good to see you back. We are so close.
Yeah.
Yes. I think we have it. You want me to just leave? Yeah. I had a couple of people send me like personal apologies after I sent out that email. Like, I'm so sorry. So much work happening. I know.
I got it.
Somebody's other way up.
Jim, do you have everybody muted who's online or how are we doing that? I just want to check and make sure people can hear us.
Hey Jim, I can hear you.
I got confirmation.
All right. All attendees are muted. So it should be, the only open mic should be Andy's. Mine is commuted.
Not morning anymore, I guess.
Well, you're close. It's morning somewhere, right?
Facing next.
Not Chicago anymore, but
Could be in your camera.
All right, well, for everybody who's online, we're gonna get started in just like a couple minutes here. We're just working out final, which is in the sound in the room and waiting for maybe one or two other people who are on their way down from the lobby.
Yeah. Yep, slides are coming through the owl.
Is anybody who's logged in online right now into the Zoom meeting have your microphone on mute?
With mics.
Okay.
Are we not picking up audio?
We're getting echo.
Hopefully on your computer.
I can hear things through Andy.
Are you still getting echo?
Seems to be kind of the knack of this room.
Speakers. Yeah.
You know, after 2.5 years of doing this, you would think we would have it just.
I know, that's what I was just saying. It's like a leaking pipe. We patch one end and then we got a leak on the other. So it just seems like,
Everybody's different somehow, like the computer's just like, they wake up one day and they're like, today I'm gonna do things like this.
this off.
That's like more, these are our space assigner.
Oh, great.
Speakers? Yes, it's on.
in both.
Can we talk there? Talk there. Yeah, I'm still here.
Did that fix it?
Whatever magic did that worked. Not yet.
It sounded like it worked. Should we just run it?
Yeah, I can't hear. We can't hear anything now. Now that Andy's muted.
Can you hear now?
Can you hear?
I can hear what's going now through Andy's microphone.
HDMI.
Anybody see the little lights on the owl?
Yeah, there's a blue one right on this side.
I don't see them and it doesn't look, maybe it looks like it's not turned on.
Well, there's one on this.
There is one on that, there's a light on.
That's good. Oh, no.
Right, it's like working with IT. Have you tried turning it off and turning it on again? Turn it off.
It does with voice purpose. Lucy light on turn.
First life, yes.
That wasn't that fast.
Right, that just came.
Series.
How that for you?
5 minutes ago.
Yeah, it has eyes. Freakish eyes scour on that stare unblinkingly at you while you're trying to talk and look natural. Not that I'm sensitive about it.
That can start off.
Right. All of our field staff have these now, so they're at every meeting. Oh my God.
Find the PowerPoint if you want to run from here. Brandon, I got it. Yeah, I got that somewhere else, so.
Did you let them know online we're having technical difficulties?
I did, but I can make sure that, are we still working on it or do we seem to be?
I think we're getting switched over, so
Yeah,
we
we
get the
can
PowerPoint.
run the PowerPoint. I think it's just the audio. The only thing I can think to do is go. No, the audio will be from here. That they can pick up, so over there.
Settings and sound, is this showing as something that's available to connect to?
You're able to check your settings and see if you can pick up that. You used to be able to, it used to come just automatically and pick up, and I feel like an update, ever since they did an update on the owls, I've had problems with it.
Okay.
Megan says she can hear us, but I don't know if it's coming through Andy's computer or through.
I just emailed you the PowerPoint, Andy.
I got that already. It's-
Let's see if we can. Yeah, on your,
display, yeah. It's open right there, but it's.
Sound is coming through Andy's computer.
yep, that's what I thought.
So we just got that.
Well, I would just say everybody jump in that car and come down to Con Hall, but you'll never get here through all the construction, so.
Owl is not one of my devices, so.
And we have quorum.
Yeah, okay. Do you guys think you're close?
Taking that
Sending
back.
up an SOS flare.
Is there any other?
Yeah, right out of here.
No, that was-
Just through Andy's computer.
So Andy, whatever we say, you just
I
repeat.
can repeat, yeah, sure.
If you'd like, why don't you sit here at least by the audio, so if you're gonna run, we can at least, the people online can hear you.
Okay,
And then at least we'll do that,
we'll get started. with-
and then maybe the chairs will have to rotate around.
Make it work. Adapt, improvise, overcome. All right, so is everybody online able to hear me okay? I just moved closer to the computer with the sound.
Yes, I do.
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. Well, we're still trying to work on fixing the rest of the issues in the room. Folks, are you able, what are you able to see? Are you not able to see the presentation through your screens? I might
We're
have to,
not- Not
Okay.
seeing it.
okay, I might have to ask everybody to have some patience and to jump on to the Water Use Advisory Council's website where we have the agenda posted. And Jim, do we have the slides posted on the website too?
Yes.
Okay, I'm seeing nods. So if
if you guys don't mind jumping on the website, we'll indicate where we are on the slide presentation, and you can follow along, which I know is not ideal, but we're going to try to make things work as well as we can. So thanks for your patience. All right, we'll go ahead and officially get started so that we're making sure to try to be as respectful as we can of everybody's time. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming here both in person and virtually. I'm Laura Campbell. I'm serving as one of your co-chairs for the Water Use Advisory Council this afternoon. And our first order of business generally is to do some roll call. It looks like we do have quorum in the room, so we'll be able to do all of the official duties for our agenda today. So what I'll do is I'll start by going around the room and having everybody identify yourselves in the room so that folks online can hear. And then what I think we'll do is, since we don't have to list locations anymore, I'll just confirm the folks who are participating online. And if I miss you, or if I ask you to identify yourself from a phone, then you'll just need to speak up. Otherwise we should be good to go. So Ben, do you want to start us out with introductions in the room?
Kelly Turner, Michigan Potato Industry Commission.
Buddy Sebastian, Michigan Groundwater Association. Doug Needham, the Michigan Aggregates Association.
Tim Frazier, representing the local government.
From Michigan State University.
Pat Staskevich, American Water Association.
Rachel Proctor, Senior Energy.
Brian Rose with Trout Unlimited.
Brian Lickers, AT2 Peerless.
Christine Alexander, Eagle.
Brandon Ellison, OHM Advisors.
Dave Hamilton, The Nature Conservancy.
Andy LeBaron, Eagle.
Debbie Imdard.
Chip Mill, Eagle.
Teresa Seidel, Eagle.
All right. And I apologize for folks as you're trying to follow along here as we're still working on those. I know sound from around the room is difficult to hear. So for everybody who's going to be talking during the meeting, make sure you really project. Pretend you're in a barn with a tin roof and it's raining and you're trying to give a presentation to 50 people. We'll go through the list of folks that I'm seeing online, and the very first one that I'm seeing online is a phone number ending in 69. Can you identify yourself, please? Okay, I see that you've unmuted, but I'm not able to hear you.
Dave Lush.
Oh, hey, Dave. Okay, thanks. All right, and I see Hannah Arnett, Jeremiah Asher, Simon Bellisle, Margaret Bettenhausen, James Clift, Grant Poole, Ralph Hefner, Ross Helmer, Jim Nicholas, John Yelich, Clay Dupree, Lyndon Kelly, Megan Tinsley, Mike Gallagher, Lena Pappas, Pat's, wait, you're here in the room. I got in a roll reading the names. Sarah Pearson, Nathaniel Sheff, Stephen Kohler, Sherry Thalen, Todd Feenstra, Austin York, and Adam Zwickel. Is there anybody I missed? All right, hearing none. This is awesome. We get to do approval of the last 3 meetings worth of minutes now that we've got folks that are here. And I should clarify, when we don't have official quorum in the room, we are still conducting these meetings. However, they are not official minutes, nor are they approved for the purposes of the Open Meetings Act. They are just a recording of a meeting of members of this council because we want to make sure that we are operating as transparently as possible. And we want to make sure that we're not meeting and in any way making people think that we're trying to hide information. So we are still posting these notes. They are still accessible on the website. Hopefully, if all the issues that were identified earlier were fixed in terms of broken links, and are making sure that we're keeping record of the items that we are discussing. But whenever we don't have quorum in the room, we're not making any decisions or taking any votes. So what we're going to need to do today is take a look at our notes from June, August, and September. And I have gotten a couple of minor corrections that have been sent in via email. So thank you, Dave, and thanks to a couple other people who have sent in to John Yelich and other folks who have sent in some corrections to those notes. Are there any other amendments or corrections that need to be made to those notes from June, August, and September? Not seeing anybody online raising a hand or unmuting. All right, so if there is no objection, we will go ahead and approve those notes from the last 3 meetings that this council has had. I'd also like to make sure that we can do an approval of today's agenda. And also call for any additional items that people may need to add to the agenda. So that agenda again is on the website for those who are online, and hopefully for those of you who are here in the room, if you're able to either log in to see that, or if you've brought a paper copy. Any items anybody needs to add to today's agenda? All right, seeing none. So is there any objection to proceeding with today's agenda and with approving those minutes from those last 3 meetings? Sorry, notes from those last 3 meetings. All right. At this time, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. As you guys remember, we do have 2 public comment periods during the meeting. The first one we try to reserve for items that are related to the agenda. And then at the end, we will have another opportunity for public comments that can be about anything that anybody wants to talk about. So are there any public comments related to today's agenda? All right. I am seeing none, seeing no hands pop up online. All right, rolling right through. I think next we've got our legislative update. And this, unless there is anybody who has got an additional note that they need to make about legislation that has been introduced or is pending or has changed its status, really kind of what we wanted to dedicate this to was to talk about any updates that we've got on the funding and how Eagle is distributing the allocation of the 10 million that got put through by the legislature. So I don't know, Teresa, if that's you or James, if that's you who can provide us any updates that you've got or what that status is.
I believe maybe this is the point where I am willing to run through our little spreadsheet. If this is the point in the agenda, you want me to do that?
I guess if you, Doug, I'm kind of looking to you to see if you'd rather do that now or if you want to do it during implementation committee's part, since I know we wanted to talk about that some too.
Yeah, and that's part of it. We can jump around. Whatever.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and do that now if you've got it ready?
I can do that. I was first going to rely on people there to do this, but I think I can share from here possibly. I guess we'll give that a quick shot here.
Great. Is everybody able to see that spreadsheet? Yeah, I'm kind of checking in with the folks who are online, make sure everybody can see that.
And it's online too.
Oh, it is.
It's online.
You did post it to the website.
James is sharing his screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we've got it both.
Okay.
Everybody can see.
Okay.
All right.
Saved anywhere though, because like I did not bring the glasses. Is there a way to make that?
Did I hear a request to make it larger?
Oh, thank you.
Oh, we're looking, James, we're looking at a different one.
Oh, do you want me to? Oh, I see. You got a small one there.
Yeah, we're still fighting technical issues here.
It'd be the same spreadsheet, so.
Yeah, it's the same spreadsheet.
around.
It's just we're not able to make all of the coordination happen with showing what you're sharing on the screen at the same time, but we are seeing the same spreadsheet.
We're seeing it fine.
Yep.
Do you want
Okay.
do you want me to stop sharing? Is there something else you'd rather put up on the screen? I can go through this so they're all looking.
Nope, you keep sharing because what you're sharing will be visible by the folks online. So go ahead and
Right.
continue.
All right. All right. So I'm just going to kind of go down the list. And the main question I expect people to have is kind of where are we in the process? And we are kind of, we'll try to note that when we know something. Just know that the legislature has been kind to Eagle this year. We have a lot of water infrastructure money that we're trying to kind of pass through. It is making our finance staff very busy, especially as they prepared the intended use plans for the state revolving fund for the drinking water and clean water side. Those have now been posted, so we think we're going to get a little bit more bandwidth to move some of these other projects through, but kind of bear with us. So number one here is kind of advancing Michigan's water conservation and efficiency efforts. So this is a one-time $50,000 expense that we are hoping to match with a $50,000 contribution from the Great Lakes Protection Fund to do some work related to kind of irrigation efficiency and providing kind of tools for farmers to kind of both save themselves kind of money and energy and improve the efficiency of their kind of irrigation systems. So we're working kind of on this one. We're kind of jumping through the hoop where we'll get ready to get money out of the protection fund to match this money before we'll kind of set this one up for a request for proposal. The second one is providing funding for 2 full-time equivalents through MSU Extension to do an education program for agricultural water use and efficiency. So this is kind of matching up a little bit with the earlier effort on kind of getting some bodies on the ground to help us with these efforts. We are now currently looking at the various current contracts we have with MSU Extension. MDART has one, DNR has one, Eagle might have one. We're trying to figure out which one might provide an avenue to go directly through an existing contract, but that is still kind of being sorted out. Any questions on those two? I'll just pause occasionally, but if someone has a question, feel free to try to raise their hand, and maybe Laura, you can kind of identify if someone's there.
Yep.
All right. Oops, a little too far here. Our next one has to do with Michigan's integrated water management database. And this is kind of getting our arms around kind of the data we do have regarding hydrologic data, you know, kind of where the water is. And the state of Michigan has really kind of put a monumental effort into trying to integrate all of our kind of groundwater databases. So the department is putting significant resources to this. This will be kind of a $250,000 contribution over 2 years to that database. What we expect to be the end result, though, is a database that will combine data from many different divisions, make it a much more functional tool going forward, and provide us kind of a broader, more comprehensive picture of our groundwater resources in the state. We'll kind of revisit this one when we talk about the hydrologic model later and how we see those two kind of dovetailing together really well. We have a little money in here for well driller trainings to kind of improve the data that we're getting from well records, and we're kind of ready to go on that one. The next one is one that we got a little curveball here recently, and we're still kind of working out exactly kind of what we're going to do, but it has to do with USGS gauges. Currently, of course, our program relies on many of these gauges across the state to provide us kind of some of our core data. So one of the recommendations in the report was to fund that kind of ongoing work by USGS. That's $350,000 a year over 5 years, so that would be $1.75 million. We have been working with a spreadsheet that talked about adding to that system to get us a little better data in some areas that we know were a little, either we're data shy, or this is an area where we're seeing some potential water shortages. So the better the data, the more people we might be able to kind of get in the system kind of using the resource. Someone brought to our attention the fact that this $1.2 million was not a direct recommendation in the final report. We think we're trying to figure out whether or not it was a kind of a sub recommendation that ended up on the cutting room floor when we wrote our final report or not. So we talk about gauges, we talk about the importance of good data for kind of long-term decision making. The language in the boilerplate talks about using the money to address the recommendations. So it's not so tight to say that it's like only the recommendations. We realize that some of them don't have enough money in them to actually fund the work. This one is very related to kind of one of our other recommendations as far as maintaining a network of stream gauges to supply information to our program. So we're kind of two things here, looking for clarification from our finance folks on whether or not if the council thinks this is a good idea, as far as kind of increasing the number of gauges. The original, we think the original recommendation may have talked about 50 new gauges. This much money would not provide anywhere close to 50 new gauges, but there are, I think we were talking in the range of maybe 8 to 10 that would make our system more robust that we would like to add. One thing we thought we were going to do a little bit more research into kind of where this language came from exactly. And then secondly, just making sure that we were feeling the right pulse from the council, that they thought that that this would still be a good recommendation going forward, and that we think it would be basically addressing our long-term data and planning needs. So let me pause here to see if anybody has some more intel on where this recommendation may have come from, and when it may have gotten maybe dropped and left behind it somewhere along the way. Any takers on kind of more information on this topic?
Yeah, James, I can help with that. So this actually came about when the legislature had started asking for, we've got all of this American Recovery Act money, and we've got all of these recommendations for spending, and kind of communication with the tri-chairs said, well, what's your wish list? We saw what was on the recommendation list. We understand it was made very conservatively because you guys were anticipating budget shortages and not budget surpluses. So therefore, what's the wish list? And so what we did was very quickly, working with the implementation committee, we put together the spreadsheet and kind of tried to incorporate some of the elements of, well, what do we need for those long-term data collection needs? What do we, thinking out into the future, because so many of these recommendations depend very heavily on the quality of information going into them, because models don't work real well if you can't get that data collected and be able to do more real world validation of the models. And so, we put together those numbers, basically kind of taking like, oh, okay, so if we're going to put in a number of gauges and they cost this much money to install and this much money to maintain per year, here's your initial installation rate, and then here's your annual upkeep, operation and maintenance rate. And what we ended up kind of hearing back from the legislature was they were fine with putting in money for the initial installation of these gauges. And so when you think about it, actually, let's see, 1.2, I think we had said 1.2 million to install 50 gauges, assuming that they cost somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 grand to install. But then we were going to say, and this is going to require a fairly substantial upkeep to do operations and maintenance, so 800,000 to maintain those every year. We gave them projections for 5 and 10 years out of spending, and they were willing to provide money to install new gauges, but did not provide us the full amount of that long-term funding obligation to keep all of them running. So I think what we're left with is probably a starting point to say, let's see how many gauges we can get in with the amount of money that we've got, knowing the data collection needs that we have. And then our recommendations moving forward can maybe be based more specifically on, okay, we've got some money to put some new gauges in. If we want more, we should be making specific recommendations for how much money and how many more.
No, appreciate that, Laura. Anybody else have any other kind of additions? As I see now, as I scroll to the bottom here, is that we're looking at, potentially up to 20 kind of getting installed, and then the maintenance cost of those over a 5-year period would be again another $1.7 million of the funds to kind of keep that system as robust as it needs to be. Anybody have any comments on this one?
Yeah, this is Ralph Hefner from the USGS. I'll just chime in a little. And I do recall the conversations that we had among the data committee, and everything that Laura said is accurate. We had talked about, again, the wish list items, and if we had the money, what would we do? And certainly to address some of the issues with the water withdrawal assessment tool and having enough stream gauging data to support the tool and recognize if there was stream flow depletion, we need a much denser network of gauges. So I'm just kind of echoing and mirroring the comments that Laura made, that yes, that sounds right. And I don't know if any of the cohorts on the data committee remember some of the conversations we had there too, and some follow-up conversations that we've actually had regarding whether we as the USGS have the capacity to do all those gauges, whether it started at a very high number, and we could implement that over a number of years, but it would take a major effort to get even 20 or 30 gauges up and running it within a year. So there's some further discussion that we need to have on that topic too. So thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, James, this is Brian, and I think that's a good, Laura provided a pretty good recap of, a year or two or more ago. Same thing in essence is, we were just in a moment where we felt like we might have been being asked how we would spend more money than we had recommended. We tried to be responsive as much as possible.
In a very short amount of time. Legislators don't like to wait around when they're sitting on money that they want to spend.
Yeah, they definitely voiced concern about taking on long-term financial obligation, and that was a concern. I think we communicated the importance of that long-term data planning recommendation in and of itself to them, that was our request so that we could lay out exactly how much of each kind of data and where in a kind of more rigorous manner. So that still kind of underlies it. Anything that you're dealing with here, trying to decipher the extra was, probably a response to just the unique moment of them maybe having a bit more. But we still need to do that long-term planning. That's still a priority to accomplish.
Again, we appreciate all the effort that people made here. And again, we're trying to be kind of responsible, knowing this will kind of ramp up over a little bit of time. We'll have some ongoing expenses. We can kind of continue to revisit it and update the council on where we are. But I think this does allow us to kind of address some of those areas where we were data short. So this is where we're currently planning to kind of move forward with the discussions. This is probably the item that we expected to take the longest, so we should be able to kind of move through the rest of it more quickly, so I don't eat up too much of the agenda time here. Next one.
That's important, so take your time.
No, it's good. The Michigan Hydro. Other comments here?
Before we go on, I just want to clarify, because it was the understanding that the 1.2 million would cover 50 gauges installation, and we were talking about additional money, which was the 800,000 would cover O and M for some time period
Per year.
per year. Are you looking at it as, with some of those numbers together, how many gauges can we install and have O and M for 5 years? Is that how you're looking at it right now?
Yes, yep. Installation of 20 and ongoing maintenance for 5. And again, if it takes us a little longer to get some in, we get a little farther than that, but that's kind of our current kind of, on paper.
And then what we're thinking is that we would like to seek more O and M money, which would free up some of this money to install more gauges. I mean, that's kind of the direction we were, as a council, we're talking about.
No, again, and to the extent that we get more money, from the legislature, this is obviously an area that we can revisit and potentially up this one.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Next is the Michigan Hydrologic Framework. And this is basically would be the idea here is that we be kind of piggybacking on kind of some of the data work that's going on with the department. The data alone only gets you so far if you don't have kind of models that kind of help you understand the data, understand kind of what might be available and where. So we assume that we would go out with an RFP on this one over a period of years to try to kind of build kind of the framework to allow the models and people to bring forth models that could work with the databases to provide kind of better decision-making tools for the department. And you see that we've got this kind of ramped up to do work over a 3-year period, and then kind of ongoing maintenance costs kind of after that. Dave, I know you were pretty instrumental in this. Anything you want to add to this one at this time?
Yeah, so part of the proposal is not just the databases, but it's also creating 3 models to both demonstrate how it can be used and also model them in critical areas that we need that kind of detail. And one of those included one of our other proposals that we want to look at meta models and whether that could work for us. So that was included in one of the modeling recommendations.
Yep.
All right.
So just question on this. This is Doug Needham. So as we look at these, I mean, you're doing a nice summary as well as just kind of what we talked about for the stream gauges. What is the next step? Is it contracting with USGS to put in those stream gauges? How do we move from even on this one for the hydrologic framework? What's our next step?
In this one, it will be a request for proposals. This is one that we assume that we're going to be kind of contracting with outside entities. So it will be the preparation of that request for proposal. With USGS, we already have kind of underlying contracts we can work from. So it's just a negotiation with USGS on kind of where their capacity is and potentially kind of amending existing contractual work that they're doing. So each one might have a slightly kind of different avenue, but this one is one that we would not be doing in-house and that we would be contracting with others to provide this work.
So Dave, are you helping to develop that RFP or what is?
Well,
if this is
someone,
Jim Mill. Can I step in here for a second, James?
Yep, please do.
Water use staff are going to draft a scope of work for Michigan Hydrologic Framework. Dave has got a work group that he's creating in the models committee. We're going to run that draft scope of work by Dave's work group and get their input. And then run it back to the procurement powers to be and find out, do we do it through a JFA? Do we do it through a grant? What mechanism do we use?
Okay, sorry, just to clarify, you're talking about the contracting for the Michigan Hydrologic Framework, but I think you were asking about contracting for actually installing stream gauges, right?
Just
in
this one was, yes.
Okay.
And yeah, James mentioned that he's going to get with USGS
Okay.
for the stream gauges. So yeah.
Yeah, those are done. Stream gauges are done through a joint funding agreement with USGS.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good.
And the one thing we'll have to watch for is sometimes there are some rules on people helping develop and bidding on the same contract. So we'll have to figure out kind of where that arm's length will need to be to make sure that we don't violate that and we don't limit who might be able to bid on this contract moving forward. Our next one is geologic data collection and mapping. And this is one where we had talked about before and that we had kind of some overlapping legislative appropriation going on. The good news is that after this money was appropriated in the subsequent appropriation bill, this $3 million was appropriated and it was identified as an ongoing appropriation. So we expect $3 million a year to be kind of included within the budgets to fund this work going forward, so that this does not have to come out of the $10 million appropriation. But we have one footnote that we'll get to in just a minute on use of some of this money to kind of catch up on some old work. But this is being funded. It just doesn't need to be funded out of this pot at this time. We have the monitoring well network, and this is to kind of become a member of the National Groundwater Monitoring Network, and which requires some installation of monitoring wells and making data available. So the costs kind of are outlined here in that it's about $260,000 for the first year, $225,000 kind of for the 3 years thereafter. There is some opportunity to kind of get some grant money once you're part of this groundwater monitoring network, but kind of total expenditure we're predicting at this point about $937,000 under this item. The last are a number of kind of one-time kind of funding things. So we had some work regarding kind of gaps in our stream flow groundwater geological data and trying to identify kind of data collection priorities. We got some work here, about $100,000 worth over a couple of years. Someone might recall some of this might have to be some of the work we were doing with bedrock aquifers and things like that. I think kind of doing some corrections into some of the information that was in the tool. We got some user interface questions and trying to improve the user interface with the tool itself. That is included in here. We've got some updating some estimates on transmissivity and identify water management areas where storage coefficients might be tweaked and made more accurate. So a little money in there. Let's see, we got a little bit of, again, more mapping money having to do with our glacial aquifer. Maybe this is the bedrock one. And that's 80,000 over 2 years. And this last one is the one I was making a reference to, is that we still have many years of old Geologic records that have not been put into the system yet. We've been working on this backlog. Going future, we have got an appropriation where Department of Health and Human Services had some money available. So they're going to cover kind of future Geologic logs getting kind of computerized and put into the system. So we're covered there. This $1.7 million is going to take care of the entire backlog, we believe, of ones that haven't been entered in yet. So that is it will be a one-time expenditure. And that will take care of kind of making sure all of those older records are included in there. And then you kind of see our grand total, which I'm having trouble actually seeing it on my screen because this is where the little box where all the people are in. I think we're just a little under $10 million, but we think we might be a little low on a couple of our estimates here for some of these one-time expenditures. So we assume we're going to come in pretty close to that $10 million, and we will be giving the council kind of periodic updates on our progress moving forward. And with that, I can take any questions.
Great. Doug, again, just let's go back to the last one that you just talked about, the well logic. And that's kind of going through and updating all the data. Now, it looks like Michigan Geologic Survey is going to help go through and do all that. John, are you guys staffed up and able to do this? I mean, that's the point. How does something like that take place in order to get that ball rolling too?
Okay, I'll just take just a moment here, is that right now we have 5 positions in with the university to be approved for hiring. And we're hoping to get that signed off so that we can start doing it almost immediately. Those positions probably won't be filled until after the first of the year. But at the same time, we have contract people that are working on the existing projects and the ones that I'll be proposing to the USGS. So those projects have the ability to be manned by the people when they get hired, but now I have to propose on them, and those opportunities are being put forth by the federal government, USGS, coming up in the next month, 2 months, and we'll be submitting them, and we won't hear about them until after the first of the year. And by then, I hope that the staff will already been approved so that we can go ahead and get started. So the bottom line is, not knowing that this was funding that we had right away, I couldn't start anything with the university right away. As soon as it was confirmed that the governor had signed it, then we could go ahead and do it. And that's what we've been doing, going as fast as we can to get those approved. So the bottom line on that question, Doug, is that we've got the positions in to be finally approved, and then we'll start opening up to hire. And we've already identified some candidates that will be primaries, but we don't know if they're going to take the job or not. So I'm hoping that everything turns out positive.
So all those, thank you. So all those really what was just discussed, kind of we need to have summarized in each one of these tasks is to say, we are working on it, or we're staffing up, or this is where we need to be. And that's kind of what we tried, at least through the implementation committee, is to try to come up with what steps are we at each one of these items. And that also helps us project moving forward, because we've got 2 years basically to get all of these under contract. And so it's kind of nice to know which one should we be pushing and focusing on right now, and which ones maybe are in the works. It's just not a high priority. It's a high priority, but John, you got to get staff, and you know, that's one that obviously we're not going to get done this year.
Well, not in the next 2 months, though, but I can comment on the last one that's on the screen that James has up there right now, the 1.7. We've got 28 staff right now already working on it. This is to keep it going. So this one is not going to change. We just need the approval, and this one will proceed.
Yeah, John's got a cadre of students that are helping with this one. And
Just
again, costs has went up a little bit, a lot more quality control than we originally expected. So costs have risen over time, but we're getting through them. So this one, the workforce is kind of just going to be at it for the next couple of years, and hopefully that's going to knock it off.
Correct.
Jim, this is Buddy Sebastian. Back to the monitoring well network. How many wells are we looking to put in or hoping to be able to get in a year with that number?
And while you're on that, will there be, will that go through an RFP process, or what is that kind of looking like?
Jim, you want to grab this one?
Well, if I could, this is Ralph Hefner again from the USGS. The dollar amounts included in that line item and my previous understanding of establishing this monitoring well network were based on a proposal that I worked on along with a number of other folks in the USGS back in 2015, 2016, and actually presented to the Water Use Advisory Council at that time, although the funding was not there to support it. So that the dollar amounts that you see there had nothing to do with the National Groundwater Monitoring Network. Those were to establish or reestablish the old groundwater monitoring network that used to exist back in the 70s and 80s, whereby we would evaluate the existing network or the status of old and existing wells, whether they're there or not at all, or whether they have been destroyed, and then doing aquifer test or slug test to see if they're still in good working order. Then instrument about 10 wells a year over the course of 10 to 15 years to get an average of about 2 wells per county covering the entire state of Michigan. And again, the monitoring well network was not designed to address specific water use issues, but instead provide a kind of a regular checkup or a physical, if you would, of the groundwater situation in the state of Michigan, and make sure that we understand long-term trends outside of the effects of pumping, outside of the effects of agricultural or industrial use, and kind of give a barometer of what's going on in the state. So again, that seems to have merged with the National Groundwater Monitoring Network, and not that I don't think it's a valuable thing, but again, the dollar amounts provided there was actually dollar amounts provided by USGS, $259 for the first year, and then $226 thereafter. And again, had nothing to do with the groundwater monitoring, the National Groundwater Monitoring Network, that has a separate proposal process.
And this is Jim Mellon. A further point of clarification about the National Groundwater Monitoring Network. The initial grant that Eagle will be applying for from USGS is only, the initial round, the only eligible expenses are the cost to establish the link between the database that Michigan uses for its data and linking that data, state database, to the National Groundwater Monitoring Network. That's all that's covered in the initial funding round. Subsequent grant funding rounds, then eligible expenses could include installing additional equipment like transducers, could include installing drilling additional wells, etc. But initially, the only expenses that are eligible are simply creating the data link between the National Groundwater Monitoring Network and wherever the state data is housed.
Ralph, you mentioned so many gauges per county. I didn't catch that number.
Yeah, it was 2 wells per county.
Okay, thank you.
So is the intent to revitalize the 2015 proposal? I'm still a little fuzzy exactly on, these seem like 2 separate things, but they're in one box. So how do those come together? Is there a revitalization of the 2015 proposal that'll go out?
Yeah, I'm seeing a difference between intent and application here.
Okay.
Yeah, again, to my understanding, the proposal that was part of the Water Use Advisory Council recommendations from several years ago that I thought this funding was for the USGS to create or update the observation well network on a stepwise fashion. Again, not get 25 or 50 wells in the first year, but instead get 10 to 12 wells in per year, instrument them and add them to the database as the NWIS database, and perhaps even the state, well, certainly the state of Michigan database as it is created. I don't know who wrote up this spreadsheet, but again, the National Groundwater Monitoring Network was an add-on that wasn't part of the proposal at all.
And again, it sounds
There
like
was a separate proposal recommendation in the 2020 report for Michigan to become a new data provider into the National Groundwater Monitoring Network. It looked like at some point the spreadsheet conflated those 2 ideas into one line.
I think I've become John Yelich a little bit of his suggestion, because there's been matching funds for like 30 some odd years and Michigan has never taken advantage of, because we haven't with them.
Right, so when you go back and look at the 2020 report, essentially what it is it's one recommendation, but it includes several items. So it includes installing monitoring wells. It includes joining the National Groundwater Monitoring Network, and then Eagle and US Geological Survey to work together to make sure that that data sharing agreement remains in place. So they were both components of the same recommendation in the 2020 report. But the funding amount, not having any data, not having any information on costs involved with merging those data, the funding amount was pulled just directly from Ralph's proposal.
So on that, just for, James, are you guys thinking that cost is over the 5-year window, the 3-year window? What are we looking for? Because as we go to do more of an ask in a 2022 report, if this is one of those quote ongoing costs that we need to continue to capture and grow, we would need to kind of know at what point do we ask for that.
Yeah, that's good. A good point. We've got, at this point, we've got 4 years worth of effort here. It sounds like we're going to have some further discussions with USGS to see how these numbers maybe have changed since the original proposals were designed. And how far would this much money get us? And maybe then we can come back to the council with, potentially a kind of a gap analysis that tells us, would it take more money to get to everything we're looking forward to per county, or and what that future need might look like.
Is there also value in looking at, where's the state gonna get kind of more bang for their buck? If you're looking at a number of wells being put in, does it make sense to put more maybe in a county where we have some depletion happening versus counties that probably will never have depletion because there just isn't the use of groundwater in those areas?
I think that gets to what's the purpose of the wells. So what Ralph was talking about is kind of this general, what's happening in groundwater across the state. What you're talking about is we need to design data collection for this program in areas with depletion so that you better understand those areas. So that's kind of an addition. I think we have.
And part of the proposal was to actually compile a group of stakeholders that would help as an advisory group to where those wells would be situated. And it was, tentatively stated that we put 2 wells per county just so we had wide geographic coverage of the state. But certainly that would be up for discussion with the stakeholder group.
John, looks like you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just step back 2 steps here is that the Michigan Geologic Survey had been looking at this monitoring network and everything in particularly our county mapping. And for the last 2 years, we've been mapping in Ottawa County, as well as now we're starting to map in Allegan County. And Ottawa County has had a record of at least groundwater depletion. And 2.5 years ago, I made a proposal to the county to say that when we're doing our drilling coring, which when we do our geologic assessment, we drill from the surface down to the bedrock so that we get the total geologic picture where we are mapping. And it just so happens that the rig that we were using could convert our drill holes to monitor wells. And so that's what we did. And so this is in an area where we know that we've got a need to understand the groundwater, both in the bedrock, which is the Marshall Formation in that area, as well as in the glacial material. And so last year, 2021, we incorporated 4 monitor wells into our drilling program of 4 locations. And so we put 4 in. This year we drilled 4 more holes, and we did 2 more in Ottawa County in areas of high need and understanding of the groundwater, and then put 2 in Allegan County to start our program there. So what we are doing as the survey is we're looking at where we have the needs. We're working with the county where they see that they need to understand the water. And of course, Ottawa County also has funds to put in monitor wells as well. And we're working with them to identify geologically where they ought to be put in Ottawa County right now. So we started doing this over 2.5 years ago. We're continuing to do it. And as the survey, when we're doing our work now, that's what our plan is to work to put in monitor wells where we see that there is a potential for monitoring long-term in those areas of geologic importance.
Any other questions or comments there in the room, Laura?
Yeah, one more. I'm either looking for Doug or Laura, since you already have been done our recommendations up, or Yelich or James. Can somebody give me just a little bit more of the context behind the Geologic digitization and that financial request in relation to our recommendations?
Well, again, I think obviously part of our recommendation had us kind of doing a long-term funding of the geological survey, the work they've been doing. the fact that that $3 million kind of recommendation is getting kind of covered from an appropriation outside of the council's kind of allocation here, we thought kind of the work they're doing basically is kind of above and beyond kind of what we've got from historic data. But the historic data doesn't do us any good unless it's in the kind of the computer. So again, it gets into that, you know, having a good data set to start with for our long-term planning, and knowing that those existing well records are going to provide kind of that more robust data set in there for us to work from kind of going forward. We thought it was appropriate to kind of fill that gap in so that we could kind of move forward.
Do you know what gap he's talking about?
No.
The gap being the
Okay,
the
so-
1 point. Yeah.
I can answer that. For years and years before Geologic, well drillers had to file a log by hand. It was done by quarter section. So this information, a lot of these wells, when they were put in to the system, they weren't verified that it was on the corner of Allegan and Michigan.
Yeah,
So-
okay, thank you. I got that.
Okay.
I know we've discussed, you know, the need to do that. I was just looking for the context of where it's at now for implementation phase compared to our recommendations are.
Well, John's in the hiring process.
Right, yeah, that's kind of what was discussed, that he's got students ready to go.
Yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
Okay.
I'll follow up.
Brian, I would say it's at a gap. We have this information, it's not in the system anywhere, and so yes, I have to go back and go through logs and to get data. So in my mind, where it goes with recommendations is filling in a data gap. So we have all the information into one location from Geologic that we can pull from. And that's going to assist when we go through our database development. And without having that in there, it's going to have, it has to get in there at some point.
Yeah.
To pull it off right now.
I'm not arguing about the need for it. I was just looking, it
Yeah, it wasn't-
appears different to me in implementation, timeline, price, and priority level than what our previous reports said.
It is, and it wasn't specifically included in the 2020 report, and we didn't cover it specifically in the spreadsheet or, you know, in the original version of the spreadsheet or discussions with the legislature. To answer your question.
That's what
But Laura, I
I
think
was hungry.
under
And
number
again,
one, the long-term planning where it says analysis of stream flow, groundwater and.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's included in the long-term planning. I'm not objecting to that. I'm just for the specific question of, did we ask for this specifically and was it in the report? The answer is no, but it's, you know.
Right, the long-term planning would highlight the need to do that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have addressed the problem. It would have
Right.
identified. I'm good.
Right, not whether we need it, just was it specifically mentioned in the report? No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. That was really good information. Thank you for providing that,
Thank you.
James.
Yep.
Are there any, Todd, I think I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just have one quick question, I guess, compound question, if you will. There was numbers for how many stream gauges were going to be able to be installed, and Ralph, you did talk about the goal of getting 2 per county out of the 83 counties. The current, what I saw in the budget anyways, was about 250,000 for the first year. Are we talking about reactivating old wells? Is that what's covered, or is it a combination of reactivating old and then installing new? Is there a ballpark number of wells that will be added to the network?
Yeah, it's actually a combination, Todd. The first year is a little higher in price because it would involve, again, assembling a stakeholder group, assessing the condition of existing wells. And to my understanding, John Esch has gone out and started to do that already. I'm not sure under what direction he's doing that, but he is doing that, which I guess would help us down the road, but he's not really coordinating that closely with us other than some passing discussions. So first of all, evaluating existing wells if they're still around, then looking at gaps and going in a stepwise fashion, drilling new wells, or even researching and figuring out, are there other observation wells that potentially could be used in this network that would still serve the needs of the network? So it's a combination.
So what is the ballpark? And I know there's different depths to wells, but what is the average? What is the ballpark for putting a new well in versus reactivating an old well? What's a
As
per
far as
well
cost goes?
Basically,
Yeah,
what's a per
off
well
the top of my
cost?
head, I can't tell you. Certainly it would be cheaper to rehab an old well, and maybe do some aquifer condition or well conditioning, pump and surge, or whatever the case might be. But again, certainly doing a slug test to figure out, hey, does this match our old records? And if not, why not? And then evaluating them at that point. So again, first, we tried to reevaluate existing wells, then drill new wells. And I'd have to look at the old proposal. It's been several years since I've been in it. But with each year passing, if we can get away with the first year of just doing reactivating existing wells at a relatively lower price, perhaps the second year we could actually talk about a drilling program where we put in several wells, along with coring down to bedrock, if that's a convenient place to do it. And, we don't necessarily have, 300 or 400 feet of unconsolidated sediment that we have to go through to hit bedrock. So again, the goal is to more or less monitor mostly water table aquifers, but in the cases where underlying bedrock aquifers or deeper aquifers are utilized for water supply, we might also look at those.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions before we move on?
Just a comment. There was made mention to the fact that John Esch was out looking at monitor wells. He's working with the survey on our program too with the monitor wells. He happened to be, and those of you that know John Esch, that he has a whole lot of things working in his head whenever he's someplace, wherever it's at. He was up at a meeting up in Marquette, and that's what he did at night, was to go look for the wells to just say where they were located. So what he was trying to do was that they couldn't be located by the records that they had, so he had to go look for them physically. And so he found that he could then find them, so he put them into what was a database right now, so we know where they are around Marquette. So if that's what the reference is to, he did it while he was up there at another meeting, either pre-breakfast and post-dinner. He was out there doing that, and I just know that he does that with everything that he does. He's just always working in the field.
All right, thanks, John. Any other questions before we move on? All right, James, thanks for the summary on there. If there's nothing else, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda. And I think this is me turning it over to Brian.
I'll grab it. Yeah, and if we can we probably turn on the lights for a little while? Wake everybody back up.
We got some romantic mood lighting in the room here to be able to see the screens.
Thank you very much. We've had an application for a new technical advisor for some time now. And I know that we've sent that out repeatedly, but I'd like to invite you to introduce yourself again. I know you've been engaged with one of our committees, but you just, spend a minute to tell everybody about yourself. And everybody should have had the chance to review your packet, but if you just want to start by introducing yourself, please.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Yong Suk Dong. I work as an irrigation specialist at Michigan State University. My research program focusing on improving water efficiency using technologies, and we actually did about on trial, working directly with the farmers. We work with the commodity group, Michigan potato, soybean, corn, and we work together to improve water efficiency. So,
great, yeah, great. Perhaps we'll make this painless. Everybody having had a chance to review the packets for several months now. Does anybody have any questions? Always confused when we do consensus versus Robert rules, but I would entertain a motion to accept.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Not seeing any. Congratulations. Thank you for joining us officially as an advisor. We will always take whatever help we can get. All right, we will move into committee chair reports. And the first up is data collection, and that falls to me. So, take off one hat, put on a different one. I don't have slides for you today, but I do want to talk with you a little while about what we may bring to you. At least in writing, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, so that you have some time to review it before the next meeting as well. In the data committee, we spent the last meeting and some time over email working on really two pieces of writing that we'll bring to you hopefully soon. The first is pretty easy, generally speaking. It is not a new recommendation. We are also just trying to write a description of our progress over the last period since the last report, with a little bit of forward-looking comment on what's in front of us now, in the near term. So essentially, we had a couple of charges that we attempted to work on in the interim that weren't related to financial investments. One, we were trying to do a data collection and use standards and protocols, sort of universal audit or check-in on where we're at with those. Many of them do have well-accepted standards. Some of them may not, especially how we may particularly want to use certain kinds of data for purposes of the program. To be very honest, we've kind of struggled with that a bit, making headway with it. It sounds good, everybody's excited about it, but it's also pretty daunting because there's a lot of different kinds of data that this program can currently use or people envision it needing to use in the near future. So we made some progress on that, but not enough to really say that we're anywhere near completion. But what we're hoping is that the work in front of us, implementing some of these recommendations, is an even better time to accomplish that while we're implementing it. So you guys heard about the long-term data planning, the integrated water database. Overseeing that, being involved with it, means that we have to re-scrutinize every type of data possible. And really at that intricate level of thinking about, if you were to design a database, you have to think about everything to do with that data. If you're going to design something that can hold and make use of it. So while we didn't make, as good a progress as we wanted to, we're pretty confident that the charges ahead of us are going to offer probably a better to make headway on that one. The other thing that we did a lot of was we did spend quite a bit of time over the last 2-year period trying to review and recollect our thoughts on the inland lakes adverse resource impact topic. Some of you are familiar with it through our discussions, but for a lot of you, you might not have really heard about this very much in the past at all. I don't want to necessarily trigger a big, hour-long overview of it now, but essentially, we have some obligations under the compact to look at adverse resource impacts to water and water-dependent natural resources. It goes a bit broader than streams. And in recognition of that, pretty much all of the past water councils, whatever the names of them were, have been trying to figure out a way to make some progress on that. We've had different report sections and reports that are getting old now that have taken, some deep dives on it. And we continue to keep trying to come back after it, be diligent on that front. There have been some cool developments in the last couple of years. So one of the things that we did is we had some people from Minnesota and Wisconsin come in. Wisconsin did a project that had a lot of overlap with this charge. For a particular, I think it's the Central Sands region or something of Wisconsin. And they did have to tackle this, maybe not exactly the way that we would have to tackle it or would want to, but they tackled the subject matter. And so we tried to learn from them. And there are some things there that I think would be potentially useful. So we did that. Also gone down some rabbit holes, I think, as a group, thinking optimistically about maybe some new data collection tools that are available that have never been, feasible in the past. and actually pursuing some that are the traditional style. So Eagle has helped move the issue forward a little bit over the last couple of years by contracting and getting a lake bathymetry pilot study done. We heard the results of that, where very human time intensive effort was spent trying to map out lake bathymetry. Pretty cool results. I mean, as far as comparing it to some of the historic bathymetry maps that are available, it gives us a look at data collection intensity and the gains that you can or can't make by spending more time on a lake with smaller transects versus less. It also gave us some estimates of how costly it is to do it this way. And we've sort of left it there temporarily. The other one that, well, the other kind of cool, hopeful new toy that we're trying to investigate is whether LiDAR has some ability to shoot under the surface of water in certain lakes and to possibly offer kind of a large scale effort to get it. We get stuck, we're at the point where we're trying to schedule a meeting with the company that seems most likely. And we all have to basically get some better information to know how deep can it actually shoot, and then how much does it cost. Depending on how those investigations go, we may want to pursue, some pilot scale work with that in the future, but we're not there at this biannual report ready for that. Kind of shift on that and also say that what makes it difficult is I think as a group, we'd like to get into talking about all the types of data we could collect, but there's still some fundamental work we have with this adverse resource impact problem, because we don't necessarily have developed how we would want to use the data. And the best way I could say that is, we have a stream tool that everybody spends a lot of time talking about. And that uses some geologic information and assumptions with cone depression, and then it ties to a bunch of statistics that were collected on streams, July mean temperatures, base flow estimates, and the response of the fish community. So that tie to the fish community statistically is sort of the mechanism of impact that we use. There might be a lot of other mechanisms of impact out there, but we chose a surrogate for aquatic health, and we did so really because there was a great data set of fisheries data for streams. For inland lakes, we haven't really gotten to the point of knowing which metric we might want. And honestly, we're really still at the beginning because we have good discussions come up. Do we just go with metrics that are linked to human uses of lakes, recreation, boating, swimming, or do we try for an ecological tie? If it's an ecological tie, is it fish? Who knows? Is it just a surrogate that we know is tied to ecological metrics like a littoral zone or shallow zones of lakes dynamics? We still have some fundamental work just to think through which pathways may make sense and are doable, and that we might think are the right ones. And so with that, try to transition now to saying, the one recommendation that we may bring to you, we can get it into the appropriate shape, is a recommendation for some financial investment to allow our body to progress the next step. What I tell you is the next step is not going to get us to a proposal for a framework. We just want to make the next step and show some real progress, because there's honestly going to be a lot of steps in front of the first step. And so the general types of help that we think that we could benefit from, there's a couple that were identified, but one is getting some limnological expertise help fully engaged with us. We have made some attempts, even over the last couple of years and session before, prior to 2000, to try to engage that type of help. People who are much more topic experts that know some of these pathways, what you can collect, what you can tie together. And we've struggled a bit to get sustained, deep engagement of that expertise. So that would help us a lot. The other category of three categories would be some facilitated modeling help? Because again, when you're trying to think through possible pathways, it helps to have just some general facilitated modeling to say, okay, if we link this to this, could we use that if we had the data? How sensitive would different things be? And that really helps you in an iterative process get to the point of knowing what type of data would be good enough for what you're trying to do. So again, with this LiDAR, they could tell us, hey, we can get you the bottom if it's less than 10 feet. Without that facilitative modeling and conceptual work, getting deeper than 10 feet might not matter. That might be game on, or we may decide conceptually that no, we have to have deeper than that. So it really guides what we would want to do for data. And then the third category is there are some of these data types that we do suspect will be necessary enough. And the group really does have some desires to explore those a little further and kind of just pilot research to say how much would it cost for this? What's the resolution? So could go longer. Other people from the data committee could help. But I think where we're at right now, honestly, is that we had some group consensus that in order to make progress, we do need some help. We had some consensus on those general categories of help. And where we're at right now is that we have a write-up, and I think it's a little too general still, as far as the cost estimation and exactly what we would invest in. And we got to work through those still a little bit more in the coming year too. You know, obviously, when you make investments, you want to be able to stand behind them. You want them very tight. But, you know, I think maybe we were too general, and we have to try to put a little bit more constraints on that projection for you. Before you come back and give it to you in writing. So that's where we're at. The data committee also desperately wants to engage in deep discussions about the implementation of all these past recommendations. So I think our next agenda is going to be largely focused on that. It's very important to everybody. I mean, you know, frankly, we expected a lot of our work over the last 2 years to be the work of implementing all of our past recommendations. Things like that long-term planning recommendation. You know, the fact that we haven't gotten started on it just keeps haunting us. What data do we need? What types? How much? Where in the state? For which purposes? We all want that. I wanted to come into this report. You know, when we made that recommendation last time, I wanted it for this report, so we could recommend those investments. Stuck. So we have a great desire, you know, as soon as we can get through this written material and, you know, possible new recommendation for you, report right up, we're going to shift over to the implementation of the past recommendations. Yeah.
Good question. So I know that the discussion has come up a lot about different sources of where we might get data to inform the tool, to inform site-specific reviews. Has the data committee thought at all, or is it kind of on the list of things to think about exploring a little bit more how to make use of some of the data that's being collected out there, and, you know, either from folks who are, you know, who are working on their own monitoring networks or doing separate data collections from streams, from wells, you know, working like some of the work that has been going on in Indiana and Ohio and some of those places to kind of help inform what we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, we do keep things sort of separated based on data and modeling. So I know the models committee talks about how to use that as well, but yes, we do. And again, it sounds corny, but maybe your guys are picking up on my favorite recommendation in the 2022 report, but that long-term planning effort, that was supposed to try to make an attempt to find every type of data that's currently available, and then make some comments about how useful it is to us. And if it's not, if it's sitting out there in an unusable fashion, we have to address that. But if we're going to go forward with brand new data collection, you have to make a complete account of what's available. Data costs a lot to collect, right? So I think of what you're mentioning as, you know, that was one of those impetuses for that long-term planning, to be able to say, here's how we're going to make future recommendations. Here's what we need to do to make greater use of everything that's available, how it ties to this program. And then what is just purely still missing? And then what's the best rigorous strategy to go get that? Yeah, and of course, that'll come up also in that integrated water database and working with the state's effort on the groundwater clearinghouse. And I know that was the nature of the survey that Jim sent out about, as part of the groundwater clearinghouse, was asking everybody, what do you have? At least that's how I interpreted many of the questions of the survey, was helping to identify for them if people are sitting out there with this type, anything similar to this type of data. How do you store it? What do you use? What's your quality control? They were asking a lot of questions about what might be out there.
Yeah, finding out what's this benchmarking survey essentially to find out what systems are out there in use currently in state, federal agencies, other organizations, what's working well, and conversely, if they've run into problems, what should Michigan avoid?
Well, you bring up a really good point, that number one, it's a major paradigm shift for all of us that have been thinking about recommendations or data or anything else and not having any money to now having liquidity and the ability to get traction. And it's so important that we manage our priorities so that we're getting traction here. And it's totally different from where we've been in history, so.
Thank you. Any other questions, or did I say anything wrong or do a bad job for anybody else on the data committee? Okay. All right, hey, thank you. We will timeline, right? We have November and we have December if we have to have it. And we will be trying very hard. That's my personal pledge. We got some comments in. We're going to try to address them very quickly and try to get you our writing, hopefully, within the next week or two. So you do have some time before the November meeting. If that is not enough time, we can push the vote till, anything on it till December. Can do that, but we're going to try to get it to you via email so that you have as much time as possible with it. All right, now I gotta remember that I'm also doing the meeting. So, Dave Hamilton and the Models Committee, you have a lot for us today, don't you?
We have a lot. So, that's new seatbelts. So to give you the context of what we're doing, so we've got 3 sets of recommendations from the Models Committee. They're for the 2022 report. You've been given the write-up and the recommendations, which have been through the Models Committee, approved by the Models Committee. What you don't have yet are the budget timelines, implementation kind of details. So we will have that by November meeting, hopefully well ahead of time, so we have a chance to look at it. These are things that we're bringing to you for consideration. So this is kind of consideration phase. Next November would be the voting on it. So next slide, Jim. So the first thing we talked about this last December, so it's kind of the half max rule and stream depletion allocation. So just.
Does this correlate to one of the documents specifically?
Yes. Yep. It is the improved water withdrawal assessment tool, stream flow depletion allocations between water management areas. Yes, so that is the write-up. There's a write-up on each one of the sets that I'm going to be talking. But we've talked about this in detail in this particular one back in December. So I'm just going to give you a real high-level review. You can either go back and look at what we did in December, or you can ask questions. I can answer any questions you have. But just as a reminder, how do we identify what streams are going to be deplete from with the existing processing tool? It's that we look at every neighbor. So you can see the well at the point, and it looks out to what water management areas are physically adjacent to that water management area, and then it looks for what is the nearest stream point to that well. And it will then make a calculation for depletion at every one of those points. Next slide, Jim. It's a nice bright one. It again, see if it does anything. That's first. Okay.
I was gonna fool around with those buttons till something happened, and that might not have been a good.
Okay. Okay, so, the way this works is there were 7 or 8 water management areas that were adjacent to the original one. Then it makes the calculation. So the, in the source watershed, it was like 83 gallons per minute. That's the max. We operate in what's called the half max rule. So you divide that number by 2 and you get 41. So anything that's over 41 gallons per minute will be included in the depletion. So the next one is 53 gallons per minute, but everything below that is less than 41. So in a current process then, only those 2 water management areas will have depletions. The others are discarded. And I do want to say that I think this is a mistake that we didn't reformulate based on identifying those streams as should be depleted. We just use those numbers based on everything, and then we eliminate the rest. So next slide, Jim. Decline. There we go. So there is an improved method that has been developed. Again, we had presented this to you back in December. And what's very interesting about this work is that they were looking in British Columbia, how do we evaluate a water withdrawal program? They saw what we did. They said, hey, this is great. And they looked at what we had done. They said, we think we can do a better job, which is great because we knew things can be improved, and that's what they did. So it was based on what we developed. It's got a very strong theoretical basis to it. It's the results have been compared with numerical models. It does a good job with that. It's being used in British Columbia for their water withdrawal assessment program. And again, it was developed from what we've done. So that was the basis of it. Next slide, Jim. So the first thing is it does a better job of identifying what streams should we be depleting from. And it looks at stream segments as opposed to stream reaches. Remember the current one, we're just looking at one point on a stream with adjacent water management areas. This looks at what segments, stream segments are around the well, close to the well that we're actually depleting from. So it does a real nice job of identifying nearby streams. They can be in adjacent water management areas, but what are the nearby streams? And then also, next slide, it also does a really good job of picking up the geometry of the stream. So if you have a stream, like in this particular case, where it kind of wraps around a well, you're going to pick that up. So you'll be taking more out of that stream than you would with the current methodology that we have. So, so then you identify which streams are nearby. You use this method for allocating the depletions. And then for the actual depletion calculation, it's using the same method that we use, which is Hunt solution. Next slide, Jen. So this is an example. Blue lines in this case are the water management area boundaries, and the black and multicolored ones are the nearby streams. So this is a good one to see that to the north, the water management area 21091, you've got the stream is kind of almost an arc around the well, and you're picking up all of the segments along that stream. But you're also picking up other ones within the home watershed. You're picking up some, and then adjacent ones, some other ones that are a little bit further away. So it's doing a good job of picking up stream segments, and it does a really nice job of the stream picking up the stream geometry. So next slide. So this kind of summarizes what we do now, what we would have done if we had looked at just the half max, and then what's being proposed with this web squared methodology. So in this particular water management area, it looked at it and it found that there were four streams in the home water management area and 3 adjacent ones. And so it calculated depletions from those. It said, okay, the maximum one is 46. So anything that's below 43, or excuse me, 23 would be excluded. And so there was one of them was above 23, so it's 24. So those two are included, they're added together, and that's the total depletion that goes into the tool right now. The other calculations are just thrown away, they're discarded. The total amount that was calculated using our methodology, but not accounted for, was 85 gallons per minute 70 gallons per minute were actually accounted for in the tool. So about 20% was discarded in this case. When we looked at 30 wells across the state, the averages were about, we were throwing away about 25 or so percent was being discarded, but the range was from half to almost nothing. So that was the range of what we were discarding. So if it had been recalculated based on identification, the half max rule would have been 97 gallons per minute. Distribution in the home one, it was about 64 gallons. Now using the web squared, the total amount is, we're in the same ballpark, we're at about 80 gallons per minute. But it's interesting, the distribution actually changes because of the geometry of the streams in this case. So the water management areas to the north actually ends up having higher depletion of about 54 gallons per minute. The home watershed has about 26 gallons per minute. Again, that's picking up the accuracy of the stream geometry and the nearness to the well. So if we went to this new method, we would have a depletion of 80 gallons per minute. Okay, next slide. So then, again, we had looked at 30 wells across the state, looking at different hydrogeologic settings, trying to get good representation across the state, good representation where we have a lot of wells. And so this table then summarizes the results from these 30. So if you just look across it, we'll show that, okay, on the very top one, on column 1, it's a little over 200 gallons per minute depleted. It's only in one water management area, the home one. The tool itself is looking at actually 7 water management areas. The total would only go up a teeny amount. So this is one where you're actually capturing almost all of the depletion in the existing half max well. If we went to the web squared, it would give us 204 gallons per minute. So again, the same ballpark, but it would be depleting it from 3 water management areas, the home one and 2 adjacent ones. And then you can look through the table and you have this table and it shows that kind of change across the state. Page, next slide. And this is just the rest of the 30, so nothing new there. So I'm going to stop here. Whoops, I need to go to the recommendations. Okay, next one's recommendations. So that's a very quick summary of what we do now, what's being proposed. So we have 3 recommendations that we would like your consideration and ultimately approval for. The first one is to determine the feasibility of using the this revised methodology, squared, in the screening tool. Develop techniques that would allow timely calculations in the online tool. In other words, if this method was so cumbersome that it's like it would take an hour to actually run it for any given well, it's not going to work. It's got to work in seconds so that it's going to work on the screening tool online live. And then determine the feasibility of conducting a field investigation to show improvement of the revised methodology versus the half max rule. Now this is put in there because there's always interest of, what does field data show, whatever. This actually is very difficult problem. If we knew the answer to this right now, we would have said, well, let's do it. But it's not clear what that would be or if it actually could be done. In other recommendations we're going to get back to some other investigations that will tie into this. Okay, the second one is to determine the results of applying the revised methodology to the entire database of registered large quantity withdrawals. Evaluate what, if any, impacts there would be on water availability and potential ARIs, and then identify possible mitigation measures to mitigate the impact on registered users and avoiding ARIs. So that we want to look at every well that's registered in the state. If we went to this methodology, what would the answer be? And then finally, prepare recommendations for the council regarding implementation of the revised methodology and any new or revised policies that would be necessary for successful implementation. So we are not asking you to say, yes, go to this new methodology. We're saying we want to have all the information as to what would the impacts be across the state. If we implement it, we can see what they would be. We could then talk about if we did want to go with this, what would we want to do to try to make things better for users, to make sure we're not creating adverse resource impacts or timelines or whatever. It'd be open to us to make that decision once we have the data. So let me stop there. I'll stop after every section to make sure that questions either on the methodology or on the recommendations.
Hey, this is Kelly Turner. We just had a discussion about data. So looking at the zipper et al. Method, do we currently have data to be able to kind of even start with number one, right? Do we have the data necessary, or do we need to collect more data? Or is there data out there that we think we're gonna need, but it might need to be in a different form?
No, we have data. So we have all these wells that are in the system. And we have what we've done before. We've got these comparisons. And there are models that have been done. Zipper did models to look at his methodology. So did a very good job of reproducing reality.
And then for stream data, like how do we pull those? You would have to like pull maps in, right? So it can, you're not gonna,
No, it's in the tool.
it's already in the.
It's in the tool. And if there needs to be some upgrading of the tool, that would become part of the recommendation. So for example, this is using stream segments, not stream regions. So it's actually a more refined method to pick up information. So if that is, okay, if we've got to do that, we need to make a change to the math that's in the tool. That would be part of the recommendation. That would be part of it. To make this work, this is what we have to do.
Thank you.
Kelly, oh, I'm sorry, buddy.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna add on, to Dave's comment, having heard the discussion at the models committee. One of the reasons why we felt like it was really important to add that piece into the first recommendation, determine the feasibility of conducting a field investigation, is to answer that exact question. What data do we have? What data do we need? How do we essentially create a way to validate that this system works better and does a better job of accounting for where water's coming from in a withdrawal than the previous version before just, deciding to take the leap and implementing it statewide. And that was exactly why we wanted to ask for that, was to say, okay, hey, this, that model looks great. What does it resemble reality?
That was gonna be my question, is the basic premise of the geological data between the stream and the well gonna change with this new method, or are we just gonna add more data points?
Well, we have some other recommendations already in the works that were funded in the last proposal.
Okay.
To update some of that.
Okay, good.
So transmissivity and selectivity, both up for looking at.
Clay layers.
Yeah. So in the whole scheme of things, in my ideal world, I would like this to move forward at the same time if we're making other changes, transmissivity and selectivity, that we do all of that at once. Because in that recommendation, the question was, okay, what should those numbers be? What does it look like statewide? What difference would it make to users if these numbers were placed?
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on the recommendations or the methodology?
Liked that there were steps, right? In the recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to the next one then. So this is downstream accounting and return flows. We talked about this back in February. We went to quite a bit of detail on it. And so the concept is that the way that the system works now is that water is withdrawn and you saw how it's allocated. So there's depletion in the home watershed. There may be depletions in a couple of the neighboring watersheds. And that's what goes into the accounting processes in the tool, in the accounting database. That's what's done right now. Now, if you take 100 gallons out of a minute or take 100 gallons that's depleted out of this one stream in a water management area, that is not considered at the next downstream water management area. There's no consideration as to what was withdrawn in any upstream watershed. Other than looking at individual wells and depletions, there's no accumulation of depletions within an upstream water management area. It's a possible impact on downstream water management areas. And so Troy Zorn and some colleagues at Michigan State University looked at this in detail, and they created a way of accounting for this. So they could look at what's actually in the tool, how much water is depleted in every water management area. What's the linkage between what's upstream and what's downstream? So they say, okay, this much is depleted in this upstream one. Let's take that downstream. Let's deplete in that one. Let's take that combination further downstream. So accumulate all of the depletions as you go downstream. In addition, look at what's the return flow, because you can't really look at one point without the other. So there's return flow. And so it does the same thing. How much return flow was there in this water management area? Add that back in at the next downstream one. Accumulate those, move it to the downstream one. So so that was done all across the state. So the significant thing, what we care about most is, well, where do we get it to ARIs? So this comparison is before means this is a snapshot of the accounting database. I think it was in March of 2021. And that's what was used for the analysis. And so it shows that there's 36 water management areas that are potentially in ARI Zone D, which is about 730 square miles. Now I want to say potential for two reasons. One is that Jim has about half a dozen or 10 or whatever the number is that he's actually looking at, saying that, hey, we think these are an ARI and they're trying to do more work to figure that out. This is showing a bigger number because whenever somebody triggers a site-specific review, it's because in the county database says, whoops, you're likely to cause an ARI, you need to go to the department and get a site-specific review. So this is more a map of where site-specific reviews be done on that as opposed to where there are actual problems.
So it more accurately shouldn't be described as water management areas in Zone D. It should be water management areas that don't have water availability under the tool. Because in Zone D means.
Well, it's the econ system threw it into Zone D, which is why it triggered a site-specific review. After the site-specific review, they figure out what do they have to do to not have that in an ARI. And then so the proper allocation is done. So it is not in Zone D. It's not really there. It's there because site-specific review is triggered by a request. Is that clear?
Yeah, yes, and I think it'll be helpful to make that really excruciatingly clear, if this moves forward to get put into the report, because I can see getting some phone calls, and probably Jim would get some phone calls from some panicked legislators saying, wait a minute,
well,
we can't have watersheds in ARIs.
Exactly.
Why do we have 36?
Yeah, and that's why I'm taking the time to explain that. For that exact reason, and we make sure that things are, I thought we've done that, we can make it even clearer. So what the after is then is with doing this downstream accounting, then what would the results look like? As you would expect, if, and this is assuming 100%. So if you say the depletion was 1,000 gallons per minute in this one watershed management area, that full depletion of 1,000 gallons per minute is sent down to the next one. It adds in its 1,000 gallons per minute, so then 2,000 gallons per minute sent down to the next one. So it's assuming 100% depletion one that is being translated 100% downstream. So if that was the case, which we don't believe it is, but if that was the case, this is what kind of results you see. So that there'd be 94 water management areas that would be in ARI. In this case, it probably would be in ARI, Zone D, because it's being triggered by these accumulations if they existed, which was 1,800 square miles. Let's go to the next slide, Jim. So not only would you affect those water management areas, but we would be affecting the ones that are upstream that are contributing depletions to the downstream ones. So when you do that, that includes the red as well as the orange, which is a lot of areas that would be affected by this. And surprise, surprise, what part of the state is most affected by this? Southwestern part of the state where irrigation is concentrated. So so we talked about this back in February, and we talked about a lot of it. This is the models committee. This is what can we do? And actually, actually, there was a little bit more that their study did that I need to go over. So next slide. So one of the other things that was done in the study was the idea that, you know, we're seeing some differences, climate, stream flow, precipitation. What are the patterns of that? How does that look? And so they looked at what happens when we look at the area that includes 2010 to 2019. Well, it turns out in the very northern part of the state, things are actually drier. In the southern tier, things are actually wetter. But it was interesting that in the southwestern part of the state was kind of middle low, it's kind of the same, not much change in stream flow, which led to the question of, are we not seeing an increase in stream flow because we're seeing increased depletions from all of this irrigation? And that's an unknown at this point, but it kind of raised the question. And so out of all of this, it was kind of like, well, we need more study. In fact, the next slide, we tried to pin this down more. Now here's your data, Kelly. So this includes information from water management areas across let's see, this is Kalamazoo River and St. Joseph River. So it looks at what would the accumulation be of water management areas if we did this depletion. So it shows what it is under the tool now and what zone it is. And then if it went over to this depletion, what would the be? And so we see a lot of things would go from zone A or zone B into D or B, or some didn't change at all as far as the zone goes. But it also showed that we had some significant accumulations of depletion. So the bottom line on the St. Joe upstream of the Pigeon, was accumulation of 200 gallons per minute against an index flow of 200 or 675. That's a pretty significant depletion. But when we look at index flow, if you add these years of record into calculation of index flow, which is not what was done, but that is, if you did that, what would the numbers be? You're actually seeing there would be an increase in index flow because of increased flows and which is a result of increased precipitation. So we're seeing there's a disconnect between 100% depletion and what we're actually seeing in the field. Now, it may be that we're seeing some depletion, but not this much. And we're not seeing it in the record because the amount of precipitation has been enough that it's kind of balancing the depletion. So we said there really needs to be a lot more study done and to understand what is going on here. So next slide, Jim. Okay, so these are the recommendations from the downstream accounting research that should be done. So the first one is to complete and exhaustive, and when we wrote it, he said a thorough and exhaustive. I mean, I said, yes, it's kind of redundant. So for writing it here, I just use exhaustive. But the idea is that we really want to dig into what information is out there, both observed and modeling of downstream propagation of stream flow depletions. Then, second one is examine the relationships between long-term changes in index flows and index flow yields relative to climate conditions at gauge streams throughout Michigan. And then the last one is conduct literature review and empirical analyses to identify and provide underlying support for the appropriate spatial scale for totaling and cumulative withdrawals that potentially affect index flow of each water management area. Now, as you looked, if you look through the report that backs up these recommendations, you'll see there's going to be a lot of digging, a lot of statistical analysis, a lot of gathering data that exists and trying to look at it different ways. And the reason is because we don't have a path forward on this. It's not like there's a lot of people who have done this work and have analyzed it to death, so that we have a way forward to say, this is exactly how you study, this is exactly the data you gather, this is exactly how you interpret the data. So this proposal is basically to look at existing data. How do we analyze it? Looking at it a lot of different ways. And so I'm going to stop there. questions on what was done or these recommendations? Okay, hearing none. Next slide, Jim. So this is a direct follow-up to what we just talked about. But it is a different set of recommendations because this is taking a different approach. So this last set we looked at is statistics, gauge data, evaluating gauge data, just trying to figure out what's there. This is taking it a little bit differently. So I'd like to start with just kind of three scientific hypotheses that this proposed study is working from. And the first one is that stream flow changes are difficult to see in downstream stream gauge records because the magnitude of the flow of those gauges relative to the magnitude of estimated upstream withdrawals and natural variability in flow. With the peak stream flow depletion response, or excuse me, that's hard to see. Then he's saying, but the peak depletion response is present. Depletion is real, it is happening. But it's really hard to see because of those reasons. So that's the hypothesis. And when I get to the recommendations, it's going to be trying to dig into this to understand okay, what's happening, what is the signal for depletions that we can try to pick up. And the second hypothesis is that the hydraulics of the flow in the channel in the stream network attenuate the stream depletion response, leading to lower peak rates over longer period times, such that although the mass is conserved, the peak depletion rate is not observed. So this is saying that if I put a pump into a stream, right in the stream itself, not a well, not a neighboring well, but I just put a pump in the stream and I start pumping that thing, I start taking 1,000 gallons a minute out of it. Well, I see that 1,000 gallon minute depletion downstream. The answer is no, because the stream is going to respond to that depletion. The water level is going to lower in the stream. More water is going to come into the stream from the neighboring adjacent aquifer, and storage is in adjacent to the stream. So when you get downstream, I took 1,000 up there, but I'm not seeing 1,000 depletion downstream. Well, there's reasons for that. So again, this is going to be trying to dig into, understand the mechanisms when we're dealing with wells and dealing with our situations. Why aren't we seeing that?
Say that one more time. Say
which part?
Part that the water's gonna come in from the aquifers,
Yes.
so it's gonna go up.
So, yes. So if you lower the water level in a stream, you have water that's feeding in from groundwater adjacent to that. You will induce more flow from the storage in the stream bank and the adjacent superficial aquifer coming into that stream. So they actually increase stream flow.
If the water level is that high.
If the water level is that high.
If it's that high.
Correct.
If and only.
That's correct.
Okay. So I have one more question.
Sure.
What if it's not depleted?
Then you will,
We're assuming that all these streams are being depleted. What if they are not being?
well, that's what we're going to look at. The idea of this recommendation is to look at what's happening, what are the dynamics that are actually going on? And you do have some streams that you don't have a lot of flow that's coming into them. Does that?
And that, we have streams that are not all flows coming into, correct? Meaning what? They're not being depleted?
No. So in some streams, you've got a lot of groundwater coming in. Some streams you have very little. That's what I'm referring to. I'm sorry.
No, I understand.
Okay. The third hypothesis is that the exchange of water with groundwater allows the stream to access additional storage. The storage attenuates the peak depletion while lengthening the response time in the system. Mass removed is conserved, but the peak rates are not observed. So I actually got into talking with that with the example that I was giving. So that the idea here is that we know that we're removing water. I mean, that's a physical fact. What's happening to it in the system and how are we seeing it in the system? And that's the question this study is going to try to answer. So the next slide is the actual recommendation. So it's to conduct a series of modeling analyses to test mechanisms that would lead to attenuation of the stream depletion. So this would look at basically test the hypotheses 2 and 3. The first one is actually be answered more by the work that's being done in that first set. That's looking at existing data and sorting through all that. But this is getting into something that's quite different. And it's the idea that we understand a lot about the mechanisms of when you pump a well, how does it draw down? How much does it draw down? How does the drawdown cone extend? How does it deplete from a stream? But we don't know, we don't have information that gives us a system-wide way of evaluating this. Say, okay, if we have 10 wells around this watershed, taking out this amount of water, what's total depletion that we see in the stream? How is that depletion then translated downstream? So it's looking at hydrologic system as a whole and using models to try to understand which mechanism is actually the most important, how are each of the mechanisms contributing to the phenomena that we're seeing. We're not seeing the peak depletions that the accounting would say was there if you just used 100%. We're not seeing that. Why? What's happening to that water? So it's trying to dig into this to understand what are the mechanisms that will help us figure out next steps, which could include data collection or other modeling, but it's to look at what are called mechanistic mechanisms of how the system works. So questions on this?
Isn't that gonna be dependent on the specific watershed? I mean, it's gonna kind of be the characteristics of, there's a lot of rainflow, there is a storage capacity of such on this one. However, in this watershed, it just doesn't have that capacity, so it seems like it would be so unique to soils types and topography and all that other stuff.
That's actually a reason for doing this, because you try to sort out, understand the different mechanisms. So, okay, in watersheds where you've got almost a direct response, you get rain and you're getting flow coming in to your aquifer and getting right into the stream, you test it out with your models. Another type of stream, you can test that out with your models to understand what's the mechanism, how important are these different factors to the results we see in the stream. So it can lead you then to this. These situations are important. We need to look for these. Does that help?
Yeah, just that, I mean, that's really important to how this is unique from looking at the data sets. This one, you can change it, right? You can build a basic model, but then you can say like recharge. You can have an incredibly low and an incredibly high. You can say, oh, what range does the recharge cap the storage off every single year where there's not anything wrong? You can play with all the variables. We don't know it. We're not trying to create a model that actually represents reality. It's kind of creating a model to help us understand the range of which variables like help us understand it better. And that keeps tying back in, right, with data and modeling, and that, hey, if we're going to go do a field study, we want to prove this, see it. You don't often know which data, when, and how you have to collect it until you do something like this that can help you understand like which types of data might really explain this stronger than other ones.
And part of the problem is that some of this you will not see. You cannot monitor to the degree level that you can see the response of one well on that stream. It's just too small in the impact basin. So this gives us the ability to understand what are mechanisms and make some decisions. Where do we go here? Either models or data collection is appropriate. What kind of data should be collected? Any other questions on this?
Now, it seems like all three of these that you brought forward, though, they all are massive. They all have a huge impact on maybe the current operating system. Should they all be done at once? Or should like this one be done first? Because we have an understanding of how things work and then go and change the one with the half max or some of the other ones.
They really make sense to go forward together.
Okay.
In fact, the very first set, I think that should go fastest of all. These other ones won't necessarily change the system. Where it would come in is that if we wanted to implement something with the downstream accounting, then that would. So there's no proposal make a change relative to downstream accounting at this point.
Any other questions for Dave?
So that's it. Look at the write-ups. If you have questions, please call me. I'd answer any questions. And we will be back in November. We'll have the budgets and all that kind of stuff. That's it.
Thank you very much, Dave. Deep breath. Thanks for getting through that. Pat, will you give us a new topic, see if there's any update?
Very briefly, we haven't met, we don't plan to meet for the end of the year. So if we have a topic that we talk about.
Any questions for Pat? Anybody raising their hand? That's great. Okay, Kelly, I understand you'll present today, right, for the Conservation and Efficiency Committee?
Yep, I think Emily and James flipped a coin and felt James was more important to hear from today. And he covered part of my report, so that is an extra bonus for me. I think there's some slides out there in case people want to follow along. Really looking at those 2020 recommendations. I feel James covered the majority of that, so I am not going to review that. I'll just say that in addition to this, Emily has let the committee know that Eagle is planning to restart the RETAP program, which is Retired Engineer Technical Assistance Program. So I've heard that that was really popular in the past and what a great resource. So we're excited about that.
That's really good news.
Yes. And that the Eagle Material Management Division is reviewing the 2020-21 Water Energy Nexus project to determine if there's any additional research needed on water energy savings. So you're going to hear a theme kind of from us today, and really taking a look in our committee really took this 50,000-foot view look at water energy and efficiency and conservation, and kind of rolled it all together. So knowing that there's the My Healthy Climate Plan out there that doesn't specifically have a water path, there's a lot of places where water conservation and efficiency fit into that. And as we go through the recommendation, we'll review again. Brian had some awesome comments on that, and we were like, oh, we can definitely see where this conversation needs to be had here, so that I know we spent a lot of time last meeting going over them, but Brian had some great thoughts and comments that I think we'll need to kind of go over today. So looking at the 2020 recommendation development, we are going to kind of go through and address some of Brian's comments that he provided and get some more input from this committee so that we can make sure we're all on the same page. And he brought up some things where we were like, oh, great point. Good to know. Other than that, the committee, we are going to start looking at revisiting our speaker series. So in January, kind of taking a look at what recommendations are going to be going to the legislators, and is there sections or pieces of those recommendations that we need to take a look at from the efficiency and conservation perspective for the next round, make sure we get ourselves education on, hear from speakers, that type of stuff. And really, we continue to try to look at those technological advancements and different innovations that are out there. So technology continues to outpace what we have. The cost for that, of course, is exponentially increasing, especially after the pandemic. But I think it's important for us to start taking a look at those. So that's our plan moving into the future. That really is kind of my really light report on that. And I think I would like to spend the rest of the time really going through the recommendation and the comments, unless people have questions. Committee members that are here, did I miss anything? No.
I could wait till the end to bring it up, but. So we talked about a proposal at the last meeting. And it was discussed as a draft. And then it was released to the council a couple days later for your review. And then it hit Gongware 2 days later. And so, you know, for the people on the committee, I was asked by my colleague about this before I'd even gotten to my mail list. To look at Donward, to see that this was in Donward. And that to me is a problem. It was disconcerting to have that put forward and it didn't come from the committee.
Yeah, and
So-
I even had people like, oh, so the Water Use Advisory Council funded this, and I'm like, whoa, like, we presented this as a concept at a meeting that didn't even have quorum, and this committee doesn't have the power to fund anything, right? And so, yeah, it was concerning. We had a lot of discussion at our committee meeting about it. Thanks for bringing that up. I was gonna do that at the end, but this works fine for me too. Good things and bad things, I guess, happen from that, right? The bad thing is, how did this get out? You know, this was a draft. From now on, we will definitely be putting the draft watermark behind that in our subject lines. So that's the bad thing that happened from that, because I think we're giving people the wrong impression, or they think things are happening here that aren't. The good thing that happened, and where we had a lot of discussion, was we had more input. So one of Abby's colleagues was like, hey, you could add this to it and it would make it more robust. And so the conversation is, are there groups out there that we maybe need to be including in conversations on these recommendations to really make sure we're not operating in a vacuum? So those were two things, I guess, that came from that.
Well, I think, if I can answer that, I think the first thing is that didn't we agree during the meeting that not everybody had seen it, and I didn't know if it was going to be, if we decided that it was going to be emailed or posted on the website.
And it was sent out. It was sent out to the committee.
It was
Yeah.
emailed to
It
the
was
committee.
emailed to
not-
everybody, but then as a result of that email, it was within the next week. It was posted on Friday gone more.
It was like, yeah, our meeting
Couple
was
days there.
Tuesday, and it was like that Friday of that week when we got notification that it was in Gulfport, so.
As something that was actually being implemented. I mean, it wasn't,
Yeah.
it was presented as.
Right.
Well, that was
Which,
more information, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, shame on Gonmore for not doing any work to confirm that it was happening, but, but I guess that also kind of presents the difficulty of we want to be as transparent as possible. And our email list is like 100 people long, because anybody who's even vaguely interested in the activities of the committee, whether or not they attend, whether or not they, are a voting member, they get stuff, they get added to the mailing list. And in general, that's not a problem, until something like this happens to where some reporter who gets paid for not doing their job apparently, decides that they're just gonna write a story about something that they've seen in an email that's in draft form. I'm not sure that there's a way to fix that other than maybe to talk to the folks at Gonmore and say, hey, maybe next time you might wanna, I don't know, call somebody to confirm that that's happening.
Well, I think it's
Just something to be aware of.
important for
Yeah.
all of us, right? Like, I'm guilty of this as well. Cause I sent it out in a Word document. And so I saw yours come through as a Word document today too, Dave, and I'm like, I don't know, is there a way for us to make sure that when we share these, that it is
PDF.
it's a PDF, but it's also very clear that this is a draft, this is, and what's happening, so.
And PDFs can be changed.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And it wasn't so much that the content was out there, but it was represented as something that had been
Funded, yeah.
basically proven.
Did we have a copy of it?
I continued Gonmore.
You have one? I don't have that.
I think Emily had copied and pasted the whole article into her email that went out to others.
Yeah, she might.
Yeah, so if you scroll down in that email where she was like, guess what, just hit gone, where she copy and pasted the text of that article in the email for us to see.
Which was basically a copy of.
I don't remember seeing that.
That might have just gone to the subcommittee, Kelly.
It might have.
Or it might have. I'll forward it to the chairs. I think you guys can-
Oh, hey, I didn't want it to, but I didn't want it.
Well, no, I think that's good. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do think that that's good to bring up. And
well, I'm not sure that we'd ever be able to find out, kind of how that got to Gonwer. I guess it's probably good to mention to, for everybody's benefit that, hey, draft materials probably shouldn't be sent to the media.
Yeah.
It's a violation of trust for all those that work so hard on it, so that's one issue. The other issue is that it's just terrible. Downloaders to jump to conclusions on anything that was spoon fed to them. If it was spoon fed to them, how they got it, I don't know, but you think as a news reporting agency, they do some verification, so.
Was there a listed journalist, or is it just one of the ones where they just take something and spit it out?
It did have a name attached to it, I recognize, remember it, but yeah. I did have one.
You guys send that, I mean, it'd be worth the time, because, we have 120 people that we send it out to, so, and, open meetings, but there's an opportunity, because if Gone were misrepresented, then they don't understand the process that we have.
Right.
And so, that may just be an opportunity to call and say, would you like an opportunity to understand how the process actually works by annual reports and postings?
Good heads up for all of us. Some of us were quite shocked. In taking a look at the recommendation and the feedback that we got from Brian, I guess I'll start with saying that the Conservation and Efficiency Committee really has, like I said earlier, taken the strategy to work on advancing conservation and efficiency through mutually benefited opportunities, right, to advance not only that, but energy and climate goals, because there's a lot of federal and state policy that surround that, and there is a significant investment in resources in these areas, and there's a lot of overlap, right? But sometimes we have to help people to understand where that overlap is. So coupling the conservation with the energy savings and the water sustainability goals, it also creates a more compelling motivation for the end user, right? So if we want a group of people to do something, we need to help them understand how it benefits them, not only the end goal that we want to do, right? And so that was really the approach that we took in putting together this recommendation. I do think after reading Brian's comments that we may have overemphasized, as Emily says, some of those additional opportunities that will come out of this, and maybe didn't put enough emphasis on the real reason that where this all started from. So I guess I'll start with Brian's. You had some great comments. Is it all right if I read them?
You can, but I had a bunch. Some of those were more for the write-up. Some of them are just, I can characterize the 2 or 3 bigger things that I had. Some of those are more for you guys' consideration in the write-up.
Yep.
For me, the questions that it posed for me were, what are the potential water savings? So when I read, and you guys probably have those, but like when I read through it, you convinced me very clearly that there's probably a lot of opportunity for energy and emissions. Like that was really clear. And that matters a lot. But it wasn't clear, like kind of, I want to say like you have to go there for this, but like quantitatively, I don't know if there's and I tried to watch the meeting on video that I missed by being absent. I know you mentioned like scheduling was one maybe thing that I didn't understand, but I just didn't know. I guess I wasn't left with like a good sense for what is the potential range of water savings to be had. I think the other main one was a little bit more, I could use just a little bit more in how the findings of this like tie to larger implementation. So if we learn things and there are some savings in those categories, just a little speculation, a little bit more on like, how would the community, could we expect 25% of the community, 10% of the community, 80% of the community over a decade to move and make those? And what would that look like? Is it, voluntary? Would there be other programs coming in. I think there was allusion in the beginning to like, there is an energy-based or an emissions-based program coming online. With that, even though we may sort of fund this from the water side, but like, would that help kick in later to help actually pay to get more people into it, based on that other energy program? And then I guess really the only third other important one was, you know, maybe it's, you know, hanging around like data and models committee too much and thinking about research stuff. But it just triggered me dealing with all that. You know, it was a 3-year, I think 10 or 15 year. And I just thought, like, from a study design, like, why not do 10, 15, 20, or 30, like, all in the first year and have maybe 2 or 3 study years for each one of those? Because the goal is to kind of learn what it does, maybe across a couple different types of pumping years. That was just more of like a study thing. I could get spreading that out through 3 years as like a pilot to actually do the program to get people in at a manageable rate, but from like a research, I was just kind of, why not front load it and then you have the study years on all. So those are probably my 3 sort of more substantive questions.
Yes, and those were very good questions. And so we were like, oh, we can definitely take a look at this. So I understand like omitting energy and emissions and the safety parts of this, but really to us, that was the 50,000 foot view, right? So what other things or information can we gather and help the end users and the people in the state of Michigan, right, who might give us money for this? Really, what are all of the benefits to this research? But I do think we need to fix our language a little bit to make that clear.
You don't have to, by no means do you have to get rid of those other benefits.
Right, but I think we need to emphasize like
The water.
Yep. And so Dr. Dong has, just this morning, I sent him your comments and he has already been hard at work pulling together some of those statistics to really help bolster that, right? So how much are we looking then in possible water conservation per year, that kind of stuff. So great point, and thank you for that. So we'll be adding that in. Youngsuck, I think partly the reason why we had the 10 a year was because that was the number felt that could be done, right? So I understand from a research perspective, front loading it and then having all of that data over that time period. I think it's having the boots on the ground to do that front loading is where there's a gap. Feel free to jump in though if I'm incorrect.
That's where some of weather conditions that we have to consider before we start the evaluation. So the wind has to be less than 2 miles per hour. And we prefer to do it early in the morning and late night, and scheduling with the farmers and all the sort of things that has to be matched to do the evaluation. So we say at least 10. So if everything matched and if we get perfect weather condition and schedules perfectly, then we're probably gonna do more than 10. So we felt that 10 was comfortable number that's already. So
yeah, and the last piece that you mentioned, like really what's the end goals? There was best managed. So right now there are GAMPs, agricultural GAMPs. We don't have best management practices for irrigation per se that says every 3 years, this type of nozzle should be replaced for maximum conservation or efficiency, or how often these systems should be reviewed. And I think, I don't know if Lyndon's on, but he gave a really compelling argument. Like if we are able to collect this information through this pilot project, then we can start building and solidifying and having the scientific data to back up those types of best management practices that can then be used to onboard farmers, because especially with the cost savings tied to it, like why would I go and replace my nozzles? Great, it saves water. So what? Oh, here's where the what's in it for me kicks in with, here's the energy savings that's tied to that and why you should do it. So those pieces all really work together. So hopefully,
That's actually beautiful that you said that, because that ties it back to the energy for me. I would just be worried, does it always just kind of, great results and it hangs out there as an idealistic EMP, or maybe gets just to meet arms. But, we're gonna really save. And so you mentioning the electricity savings as kind of
the care.
incentive that could try to help get them widely adopted. That's great.
Other states have also shown that that is a primary reason that people will take this. It's because of cost saving related to energy. So, and just broadly on the BMPs and the right to farm generally, they are usually generalized categories, understanding the science behind them changes constantly, the technology changes constantly. So there are always improvements to meeting that management practice goal. That's how this.
One comment if I could bring up, so this year we worked with the 2 irrigators out in Southwest Michigan. They had this sprinkler about 7-8 years old, and we conducted evaluation before they change it, and we did it after. And we found there's about 0.2 inch of water can be saved every inch of water they apply. So assuming they're applying they're growing corn and soybean, which typically we apply 6 inch of water, which means about 1.2 inch of water they can save per year. So multiplied by the 100 acre size, I think I calculate that's about 3.2 million gallons of water they could save. Those folks who has some issue with the sprinkler.
So
But no
finding just a way to
state-
insert that in as like,
Yeah.
we have the following reasons to believe these could be the water savings.
Yeah, this is why your comments were like, oh, we see what we did.
No, it's
So,
okay. Thank
yep,
you.
adding those back in. We're gonna
That's great. Thank you.
go through this language again. We'll run it past our committee just to make sure everybody is good with the changes. And then, be able to bring it back for everyone to take a look at.
Thank you.
Of course, get it out through someone with draft behind it, well before the next meeting so that everyone can take a look at it. But,
Thank you so much for taking the time with my comments.
yeah, no, thank you for, you had to go back and watch a video of this last meeting and
I
crazy
fast
for.
forwarded certain parts.
doing-
It was a really long video.
I imagine, but I really like making sure that we're getting comments from everyone. So we're not operating in a vacuum because I can't tell you how many times I've seen this thing, right? And I'm too close to it to recognize like, oh, that was kind of a big misstep, right? So we appreciate it. And maybe there are others that we need to start having review some of these so we get those perspectives.
That's what we're doing at this, when it comes into a couple months before the report's due. So. Thank you. Anything else or anybody have any questions?
Just one question. Do you actually want me to send this article to somebody to?
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah. Okay. And then Elizabeth McMurtry was the author. So. You guys can send this to.
Once we pass it, we'll send it to her again.
Right.
Can I ask a question on that, like,
Well, Emily had sent it to us, but this was in Gonmore.
I know, but then so it was just within the subcommittee?
I guess so. I was thinking it went to the broader committee,
Let me
but
look.
it sounds like it did, so. And I get Gonmore anyways, it just had.
I was just curious if it was sent out to the larger listserv, if she remembered.
Right.
Oh, like,
Oh,
who's on the,
she sent it.
who's on the list for,
It could have been.
it could have been, yeah.
It could have been sent out.
That's why I was asking who got it.
That's a good point. Does anybody
Obviously,
have
not trust
that?
you.
Yeah, I saw that the other day when Sherry's email came out. It said like 120
Right.
recipients.
Mhm.
Anybody have that list?
You mean it's like a group that you could stick on your Outlook?
No, I was just curious. I mean, I was shocked that we had approved.
I mean, yeah, if you pull up the email, you could. know, she doesn't hide anybody's email address, so you can actually look and
Right.
see everybody who's on there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, good day, right?
I mean, as a matter of fact, when I do a reply all, do stuff like, hey, everybody show up so we can have quorum. I actually do get a couple that bounce back to me because list maybe.
No, and that's not what I'm saying, it's more how it was represented than anything.
So Emily
You're
sent
right, it's
it
literally
to,
anybody who has ever
I think it
shown
was just
interest or asked a question or shown up at a meeting or done anything related to the Water Use Council.
This is their subscribe button. So can people subscribe?
I don't remember if there is one on the website or not.
All right, we'll take a look. And Laura, you have the implementation committee update, and I know that the next agenda item is the report content, logistics, and timeline. Do you want to keep those separated, or is it really become merged for your committee?
It's very merged.
You want to handle both,
Well,
committee report and, item number 9?
If I can kick it off and then you fill in the gaps. So first of all, James, is there a way, or Jim, that we can get a copy of that spreadsheet that you guys talked about with your notes on there? Because that would help, because that's one of the things that we're looking forward is saying, okay, as we prepare for the 2020 report, we want to be able to say what are our action items that are being done to the items that we've identified. Understanding that funding came way late, but at least we can give a little bit of an update that says, hey, thank you for the money. These are our steps. We actually do have a plan and we do plan to address it. So that's the one thing. There are some other items that we talked about too. And Brian, you mentioned it, the Michigan Integrated Water Management Database. There needs to be meetings basically with work groups and Eagle to determine what are things that are being done right now, what are the gaps. And so there are some steps, even pre-funding any type of advancements, we've got to be able to identify what those gaps are. So those are some meetings that we talked about in the implementation committee that says we can schedule that and let's get it moving. Looking into the 2020 report though, there was a lot of items that were identified in the 20 report that had ongoing funding. We need to capture that and to say, okay, these programs, once they get developed, stream gauges get put in or whatever it may be that are identified, we need to be able to keep that as an ongoing basis. So that's where it gets kind of tricky, that it's hard, it's going to be hard to ask for more money in the 2022 report if we haven't completed the items that's really needing the ongoing funding. So there's going to kind of be a dance. It's going to be tricky, I think, as we make our recommendations. What are we really looking for? So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We just kind of wanted to look at the items that are on that spreadsheet, develop some type of plan, and make sure we capture any of the funding requests we needed going forward.
Yeah, and so I guess for clarity, I really don't have any intention of copy paste of that spreadsheet onto our report, realizing that it's, that it's just a very rough, like, we threw some numbers together, the legislature threw some numbers together, Eagle took it and threw some numbers together. Really what we just want to have it in reference for is to, lay out kind of point by point. Here's what we recommended in 2020. You guys gave us money. Thank you very much. Here's our plan for for moving forward and how that's getting implemented. And just sort of make a bulleted list or whatever looks nice on the final formatting of the report. So if you're able to share that with us in draft form, if you just want to send it to me, that's fine, because
Right, yeah.
the next part of that is, I've got the recommendations, that we talked about earlier that have already been put forward and approved by the council. And so I want to put that, obviously in the new part, along with any recommendations that are going to be approved next meeting. And then include that along with any write-ups that anybody's doing, like Brian, I know you talked about the data committees doing it. Emily, I know you had talked, sorry, Kelly, I know you had talked about, and Emily had mentioned that she thought that there was like some summary materials from the Conservation and Efficiency Committee, just to kind of talk about if it's not related specifically to a recommendation, here's stuff that we've been working on and we're looking forward to continuing working on as the council keeps moving forward. If there's any of those materials that you guys can get to me, what I want to do is kind of put those together in a very rough draft.
Have the implementation committee take a first crack at it, like the last week of October by email, and then send it out to the whole group by the end of the month. So you guys have a few days to start chewing through it a little bit before we meet in November, and to, and sort of identify those big rocks that we need to make sure are included in the report before it gets finalized. And before, obviously, we have the other recommendations to get through and decide if they're approved and if they're included in the report.
So if we, to help with that timeline and just at least putting all the pieces together, you guys can handle it that if like our committee, if we're not done wordsmithing, but we send you what we have so you can at least put it in. You'll keep track of the fact that that has not been blessed,
Yes,
but it at least helps you feel.
yes,
Okay,
yep.
and I'll only email it to you and Doug.
But yeah, so what I'm hoping to send out, again, by the end of the month to the whole council, and it'll say draft all over it, is very, very rough, just like the stuff that we put together so far. I want you guys to make sure, number one, that it technically accounts for everything that, either that you want to make sure is included in the report, or recommendations that have been made, but then also to give you kind of the, oh, I want to do a write-up about this thing that we've been working on or doing, to give you ideas of what else needs to be included in that report. So what I'm planning on sending out at the end of the month has room for additional sections to be added to it. So don't think that it's like, oh my God, my thing's not in here and now I can't add it, right? It's meant to be, here's what we've got, tell us what else we need to add. Draft is in progress, and I'm gonna get it out there to you guys so you can look at it.
Any other questions on implementation or report?
Doug and Laura, I guess it also applies to Brian and Megan for data collection committees. If you would like, it's helpful given the overlap between the Eagle groundwater database, data warehouse project, and master environmental data base, or whatever it's called, 2020 report. If you would like any of the LPI staff to project team to come and talk to your committees, give you an update, let me know, and I'll reach out to them, make sure that happens.
We'll check with our committee and we'll just see whether we should have them into a committee meeting, or if time is of great urgency where a couple of us can go and be more flexible. Any other questions on the report timelines? Okay, is anybody raising hands online? Okay, perfect. All right, I'm gonna pass it off to Brian.
The closer, get us out of here by 4. At our last executive committee meeting, we talked a little bit about the need for Jim Mills to supply all the data every 4 weeks now, and single update. He gets a little bit of a break today, but we do have an eagle update, so. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, good afternoon. This is the abbreviated version of the program update for the water use program. So I'm going to start by providing a personnel update for my unit. Then I'm going to provide an update on a couple of firsts for the water use program. The first is an update on an escalated enforcement case. And the second is our very first contested case filing under Part 327. Then I'll provide an update on the Aqua Bounty aquaculture project that's just over the border in Pioneer, Ohio. And then an updated water management area depletion status map was requested by one of the council members, so I'll provide that. And then finally, answer any questions that council might have. So, first, and Jill, if you're on, hopefully you got your camera on. Yep, so I'm happy to announce that
Yeah.
Jill Van Dyke is returned after being off way too long on medical leave. But she's going to be transitioning back into doing pre-screening reviews for proposed public water supplies, reviewing groundwater models along with Lena, and hydrogeological studies. So right now, while Jill's still getting up to speed on everything that happened If you have any specific questions about specific projects or files, please go through me. Now, Ralph, if it's appropriate. Okay, Eagle, our very first escalated enforcement referral. So the way the enforcement process works in part 327, I've talked before about how we send out compliance communications for less serious violations. More serious violations have a first violation notice and then a second violation notice sent if the responsible party doesn't come back into compliance. Well, if they still don't come back into compliance after the second violation, then we have to draft an escalated enforcement referral, goes to the environmental enforcement review team. And if they accept it, then it becomes an escalated enforcement referral to the Department of Attorney General. So in November of 2019, water use staff identified 6 Part 327 violations. One was a registered large quantity withdrawal that was installed and operated differently than what was authorized. In addition, there were 5 other unregistered withdrawals. We met with the property owner and their consultant in February 2020. In May 2021, the case was referred for escalated enforcement. And then AG was assigned in April of 2022. Eagle and the property owner and their representatives signed a settlement agreement out of court, which included a civil fine of $30,000. And as part of the settlement, those 5 SSRs, 1 amended registration were authorized. So it ended up bringing those 6 violations back into compliance.
So Jim, there was one landowner responsible for all those violations?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Might just throw in there real quick also, the number of communications that happened between these dates you see on the screen were numerous, so there's.
Yeah, it's a condensed summary.
Yes,
Chronology.
multiple opportunities over years.
So do you have details, like a large withdrawal was installed and operated differently than authorized? So I've seen emails from, or not emails, but letters from Hannah where she says, hey, you guys put XYZ in, like, you're gonna drill the 230 feet. You guys drilled the 235 feet. You didn't go back in and fix it in the system. I fixed it for you, but know in the future, like, this could be a problem. Do we know, like,
That,
is
what you're
that-
talking about would be an example of a amended registration compliance communication. So if it didn't cause an adverse resource impact, and there was water enough to authorize the as-built as operated, we would not send a violation notice out. We would simply amend the registration, send a compliance communication back out to the property owner, and close the amended registration and say, okay, this is what we did, and here's how to avoid having this happen in the future.
But this is different.
Right. So this particular case, we have one withdrawal that was installed and or operated differently than what was authorized by the tool or an SSR. In
Explain
addition,
what that means, so I guess that's where I'm trying to understand, like,
well, that
how
could be,
egregious is this?
that may be pumping more
other-
than what was authorized. It might be installing withdrawal shallower than authorized, so it would have a greater stream flow depletion or some combination thereof.
In this particular case, I believe it was a larger pump was installed than what was registered for, and more water was being pumped and used than what was registered for. And it was, the amount of water is reported to MDR, and it was much greater than what was kind of. both
Andy
those-
is correct. That is the case, and I do believe it was installed slightly shallower as well, which all increased the calculated depletions for it.
Then 5 other pumps that were not registered.
Right. And those unregistered withdrawals, there wasn't enough water available in the watershed to authorize it as built, so we had to go through the escalated enforcement process.
So those 5 unregistered pumps, if they were registered, they wouldn't have actually been given the green light to go ahead and put them in because it would cause adverse reaction. One of those or several of those would have had to go through an SSR process to be, if they were doing.
Yeah, like the last bullet, those 5 unregistered withdrawals, we end up doing site-specific reviews. And combination, through that process, we were able to amend registrations and reached a point where there was enough water to go ahead and authorize those and got that incorporated as part of the settlement of the enforcement case.
So in the end, there's no depletion happening there. It all fits now within the MyWatt system.
Yeah.
Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
But I think Hannah would like to be on hand to provide details. And Linda
Yeah.
was also asking if about the 5 unregistered pumps, what age they were, they're green.
Yeah, so the 5 pumps, we do deplete for some of those pumps after, like during the SSR process. However, most of them, we found a way to cover them under baseline capacity that the property owner had. So we are depleting for some of those pumps. However, the watershed is not a depleted watershed at the moment. And all of those pumps were in the same watershed as well.
Any other questions on that?
Well, so the fine then was basically for not registering those.
Now, the enforcement provision in part 327 is $1,000 for that. That type of violation is $1,000 per violation. As it's not the more serious penalty provision, which would only 2 things: causing an adverse resource impact or violating the terms and conditions of the 327 permit. So all other violations of part 327 fall under the catch-all category of $1,000 potential fine. And that, so $30,000 is what the amount that both sides reached in the settlement. So we asked for more. They came back with a counter offer, and then 30,000 is what the 2 sides agreed upon.
So if it's, I'm just trying to understand this because I know I will get all sorts of questions about how fines are levied. So if it's $1,000 for each of the unregistered ones, and would it be another $1,000 for the one that they operated?
So potentially 6 violations total times $1,000
So 6,000, so
times another.
there's a gap between 6 and
Over
30.
multiple years.
So
So,
it's like per year?
Kelly,
Yeah.
Kelly, typically when something goes to escalated enforcement, the fines aren't really the issue. It's a negotiated settlement. So they'll come up with a major fine that's negotiated.
Right, I'm just trying to figure out like, what's the baseline for that, right? So if their original fine would have been $6,000, what pushed them over? Like, were they unwilling to cooperate? Were they not given information that they were asked for? Like, what pushed them into escalated enforcement and then brought on the additional fines? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
well, as I said, multiple violation letters were sent.
Maybe
We
can
had
dig
a
into
meeting with the property owner and
Maybe you
consultant.
can dig deeper after the purpose of our spot here. Things going if we can.
So we
That
can
was the
talk,
last
we
one.
can talk to you outside of this without naming names.
Yeah,
I just
So
have
the other
one question.
first for the program, administrative appeal rights in part 327 only apply to the permits for new or increased withdrawals over 2 MGD. And we received our very first contested case hearing filing for a permit that we issued to Consumers Energy for the Jackson plant. Eagle is in the process of scheduling a meeting with the petitioners, so we're in that run-up period where there's having initial meetings with the petitioner to find out, okay, what are your concerns? Can we reach resolution or do we need to proceed to an administrative hearing from administrative law judge? So
Just to clarify, somebody's disputing Consumers Energy's registration.
correct. They're contesting that, issuing that permit.
Jim, can I ask one question to the previous? Do we have, and I know that you can't tell me anybody what their name, but do we have any others that are in that position that the previous one you were talking about, where they had unregistered wells that they didn't fulfill their sign-off ability, in other words, submitting the data?
Are you asking me if there are other unregistered withdrawals out there?
Right, that you're.
Yes, there definitely are.
That part I knew. I'm talking about, do you have any that you're not chasing, but you're seeing right now that they have not followed compliance? In other words, haven't submitted the data. Is this the only one, or do you have others that are in the same position?
There may, yeah. Well, I can't comment on Hannah's compliance and enforcement workload, but it would be a safe bet that there are other unresolved violations that may end up going that route.
Okay, that was the question. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions about the contested case? Stay tuned. Okay, moving on to Aqua Bounty.
I think Todd Beanzer does have a question online.
All right,
I think before.
go ahead, Todd.
Thank you. I was just going to offer one point of clarification, because obviously I was the consultant that was involved with it. The SSRs, those we weren't able to get to an agreement on the data out there. The gentleman had a number of monitoring wells, stream gauges, gain loss surveys, aquifer tests. But at the end of the day, I think you did mention it, the wells were granted on the basis of baseline capacity after about 2 years of going through it. So I was brought in after there was an issue already, but the resolution was basically gotten to using baseline capacity, not unless you're calling that part of the site-specific review. But that was kind of right at the end there. So the data and the evaluation of the depletions, that's not how it was resolved. So simply just a baseline capacity. So just a clarification. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Yep. Okay, back to Aqua Bounty. Aqua Bounty Farms Ohio LLC is a proposed aquaculture facility near Pioneer, Ohio, which is just over the border. It's a proposed aquaculture facility that will raise salmon for food. Ohio DNR first issued a permit to Aqua Bounty for pumping 3 MGD from their proposed south well field. Aqua Bounty has since surrendered this permit to Ohio DNR because of issues with the current property owner where the proposed well field would be located. Aqua Bounty then applied for a permit to pump 5.25 MGD from their proposed east well field, which is located even closer to the border. Eagle did provide public notice comments, as well as my unit provided technical review memos for both the south well field permit application and the east well field permit application. Eagle did request copies of the consultant's groundwater model files. We got the narrative report, but we were refused access to the electronic model files. So that limited our ability to have Lena actually review the groundwater model. Next slide. So current status, Ohio DNR issued a permit to Aqua Bounty for 5.25 MGD from that east well field. Those wells are pumping in the deeper Mission-Doe glacial aquifer with a treated discharge to the east branch of the St. Joseph River. That's the St. Joseph River that's a tributary to the Maumee in the Lake Erie watershed, not the St. Joe River that we're more familiar with in Southwest Michigan. Aqua Bounty is required to submit a monitoring plan to Ohio DNR for their review and approval. Eagle has requested access, opportunity to review and comment upon that monitoring plan. Based on the groundwater model from the consultant, they're predicting that the capture zone for the East well field will extend well into the state of Michigan. Consequently, Eagle had recommended that Ohio DNR require Aqua Bounty to install vertically nested monitor wells in both the pumped Mission aquifer and the overlying shallow aquifer. Located and have those well nests be located within the predicted drawdown zone in the state of Michigan. The way the permit is written, there's only one nested well set on the northern extent of their impact zone. And it's unclear right now whether that's actually going to be required to be in the state of Ohio, or whether they're going to require Aqua Bounty to install it within the state of Michigan. So Eagle is going to request that Aqua Bounty and Ohio DNR share the groundwater elevation data with us from whatever monitoring wells they do put in. We're going to be requesting a follow-up meeting with Ohio DNR to discuss our remaining questions and concerns. And we also have a joint funding agreement. State legislature appropriated funding for the Mission aquifer. So we have a joint funding agreement with USGS to have them create a groundwater model for the Mission aquifer. And the scope of work can include installing additional monitoring wells in the state of Michigan. So that's where it's at right now.
Jim, I've got a couple questions. So one is, this isn't big enough to come under the charter notification process. This doesn't come under the charter.
No, it doesn't come under the Great Lakes Compact because the consumptive use is less than 5 MGD. So it's not subject to regional notice under the compact.
And then the second question is the permit, the agency that has authority over this is Ohio.
Correct.
Michigan doesn't have any authority. So you're working under their authority to try to get your interests covered in that permit.
Correct. We're also drafting a memo to request Michigan Department of Attorney General assignment to review the applicable state statutes and civil case law and give us Eagle advice on whether we've got any options, whether the state of Michigan has any other options. Any other questions about Aqua Bounty?
Safety check. Jump in that area and tell me you're a well driller. Have anything on your shirt. You will not get out of a party store or restaurant.
If at a future date, it's appropriate and possible to get an update about the authorities issue, that would be of interest. Just how it ties to our part 327, we have some responsibilities for assessing, protecting, and if this one offers a very weird scenario, I mean, are you supposed to be subtracting this from ours? Just all kinds of.
Well, based on our review of the available information, there seems to be a pretty aerially continuous confined layer separating the deeper Mission aquifer from the shallow groundwater and surface water. So we don't think there's any risk to streams, lakes and streams and wetlands in the state of Michigan from pumping the Mission aquifer. Biggest risk would be any private wells, water supply wells, including any agricultural irrigation wells that might be screened at well depths and locations that would fall within that zone of influence. But yeah, after Eagle meets with ODNR and after we hear from the Attorney General, we can come back and provide an update to the council. Then Mr. Yelich had requested an updated water management status, depletion status map, so that's what that is. And John will be emailing you that separately, so. It's hard to see a little bit with the lighting here, but zone A is green. Light yellow, zone B, zone C, orange, and then watersheds that are zone D, pending review, are in red. So. Any questions about that?
How many more of that from the last time? For example, like how fast are we clicking up into Ds and Cs?
Anna, do you happen to have that?
It's in a folder and I could send it to you, but I don't have it.
We can dig up the number and send it out back to you outside of the meeting here.
Yeah, or even next time in your report, like, we get a map from current and then a year ago, just to have some idea or comparison.
So that's, looking at map overlays from different years is really useful because those reds pop in and out as SSR are depleted. So they find more water or less or it's returned. So it's not like there's certain sections where next year part of that might not be there or it might shift in. I'm correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just not like a linear progression. These things, especially zone D, especially, it's a transient state. When this map was taken, when this map was made, it could have changed the next second. There could be more as new, site-specific reviews are requested through the tool. I think you can, new zone D watersheds could have popped up in the very next second. So it's a very transient state. And then as we work on those, the ones that are now red in zone D, they drop off. They go back into a zone
Because
C
they
or
actually
A.
find more water. There used to be like one up in the UP. For a couple of years.
Yeah.
And that is bigger.
Right. So it's
So it's
kind of-
very interesting to look at the maps.
It is interesting to see. It's just not as clear of it doesn't give you a definitive statement, the full story of what's going on, but it's cool to look at. And we do have a history of those maps we've done.
Interesting, thank you.
Anything else, Joe?
Are there any other questions? Any questions online, Andy?
Nope. There.
Okay, thank you. Our next meeting dates are November 10th, Thursday. If we could get kind of in-person participation we got today, we'll be all set.
Right.
Time for me to offer up the floor for public comments. Anybody have any public comments they'd like to bring up? See the hands?
Here.
Going once, going twice. Are ready for a motion to adjourn.
Shouldn't that be adjourned?
We are adjourned.
Brian, one of your questions, I have something that from a nerd to a nerd, you might want to see. Less than 2 minutes, but I think it's really good. Right?